From iRacing's virtual Daytona International Speedway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to the 2023 iRacing Daytona 500. The iRacing special events calendar rolls on through Daytona Beach, Florida for the first major oval race of the season. And we're happy that you're with us on the iRacing Esports Network. Alongside myself, Evan Pasoko, joined by Arjuna Kankipati and Andy McEwen. We encourage you to join us as well with live timing at RaceSpot.tv/timing. But gentlemen, it is a long one on deck tonight, and one that all of the oval racers on the sim, Arjuna, have been looking forward to. Really, it feels like 2023 is finally underway now that we're here in Daytona.
For these oval drivers, especially with qualifying going on in the real world, they get their 36-week journey across of the US underway in what is going to be the start of the NASCAR iRacing Series. We get to watch 4 full-length races here live on RaceSpotTV and on the iRacing Esports Network. It's a treat, and it starts, of course, here at the World Center of Racing.
And you see a look at the 2023 special events calendar, and it is not the first time we've been racing this year. In fact, not even the first time we've been racing here in Daytona, with the 24 and the Aurora a little bit earlier, but those oval drivers have been looking forward to this one. All of the major NASCAR Cup Series events on this calendar. You got the Coke 600 later this year. Of course, you got a trip to Bristol, the NASCAR finale to Phoenix, but you have to ask, when you look at this NIS calendar for 2023, if you had to circle one, everybody will give you the same answer, and that is the full-length Daytona 500.
Yeah, 100%, Evan. This is my favourite race of the year, period, across any form of racing. And it's the perfect way to start off the season. Start with your biggest event and arguably your toughest to win. But we'll be visiting all of the tracks, including the Bristol Dirt Track, of course, the new Chicago Street Course in the middle of the season, and then the 10-race playoff stretch to round out the season. It's going to be a fun one, that's for sure.
And those 4 full-length races, as you reference, bolded there. Of course, the other one's going to be that slightly smaller length distance that these drivers will be racing as well over the course of the year as they compete in their various leagues, but also for this official racing championship. So tonight, coverage of the top split. Couple hundred drivers going to be racing all across the iRacing service. The best of the best are on tap, as we're just a few minutes away from saying let's go racing from iRacing's virtual World Center of Racing. And the way that this race tends to always play out, we were just talking about, Andy, your experience behind the wheel of it as well, and my lack thereof, I should say, when I've ran it, is it's always a battle of attrition, right? Not often do leagues cover 500 miles, which is what makes this special event so unique. You really do need to go into this with pace and with poise if you want to be there in 3 hours when we're talking about who's going to be in the battle for the race win.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people, I think, look at this super speedway racing, the pack racing, racing in the draft, and they think it's all about aggression and making those big moves, and it is inside the final 5 or 10 laps. But for the first 190 laps, really, it's all about survival, looking after each other, maybe looking after that fuel mileage as well, trying to think strategy. This race could easily turn into a strategy game, particularly through the middle part of the race. There's a lot to this, a lot more than just making those big aggressive 3-wide moves. There's a time and a place for that, but you have got to be patient. Patience, or lack of, is what will win or lose you this race.
And we talk about the best of the best. That was a quick glimpse at Parker White. A lot of eNASCAR representation. Garrett Maines, of course, somebody who's been around at the top level of sim racing for quite some time. And for those of you who join us regularly for these special events, you'll know, of course, the numbers denote the iRating rank associated. So White, Maines, DeMerchant, yeah, those are the heavy hitters, are junior right at the top of the board, and they expect themselves to be in contention. 5-minute closed qualifying session right now, so single car runs to set the grid for this 500-mile affair.
Yeah, you'd think for some of these eNASCAR drivers, after already having done a race here yesterday, maybe they would have wanted a bit of a break, but no, they're back for some action, see a change at the top. But what we're seeing out of Garrett Maines here is what we expect in qualifying here at Daytona. Go up high on lap number 1, build up your momentum, and then run as short a distance as you can on the second lap and build the momentum up and see where it all ends out.
And he is on lap number 2, so he jumps down to the bottom of the racetrack. Let's see what he can do. His first lap time was about 2 whole seconds off of the current pole time. Let's see what he can do. He's looking for a 49.520. He will go 5.78. That is a good lap for Garrett Maines. 6 thousandths of a second off the very top position in 7th on the board right now. Currently, that's the man they're chasing right now. Number 7 ranked in this race, Nicholas Vroman on the top of the board, unless somebody can swipe that away in the next 10 seconds or so.
Yeah, and interesting to see the way that the drivers are attacking that second fast lap in qualifying. It always used to be the case that you would hug that double yellow line, stay as close to the bottom of the track as possible, but it really seems that with these next-gen cars, you can actually afford to, and maybe it's quicker, to just roll up off the bottom slightly coming off the corners, try and keep that steering as open as possible, because these cars do not handle all that well when you try and keep it down tight coming off the turns.
You don't try to drive the race car as much as drive the racetrack and allow it to kind of steer the race car around. Of course, drivers using that apron as well in the tri-oval to get every thousandth of a second as possible. But with that, qualifying has drawn to a close, and 36 of iRacing's best are ready to race in pursuit of an iRacing Daytona 500. Let's go trackside and take a look at your iRacing starting grid, and it is pole position for Nick Vroman, the 49.520 best of them all. It'll be Eric Royce alongside in second. Parker White, the number 1 seeded driver, will find himself in third alongside Chris Wilhite in fourth, and then it's Travis Krahenborg in fifth alongside Alex Murray. That's row number 3.
Garrett Maines is going to line up in 7th with Justin Levine alongside, with Tommy Gossett and Joseph rounding out the top 10. Tyler Justice and Chris Pfeffer will share row number 6.
Then we move down to Sean Powell and Dustin Montgomery together on row 7. 8th row for Jonathan Ossalim and Kyle Perry, with Colton Harvey and Dalton Collins both just inside the top 20.
And that is it for the drivers who take times in qualifying. So provisionals the rest of the way home as Seth DeMergent and Adriano Pinheiro round out your top 20. Boyd Hogan, Marcus Ruckman going to be through the top 22 with River Hayes and Steele Langford your top 24.
Hoffman and Adam Blocker, my Power Slide teammate, hoping for some better luck than he had here last year, where it ended within the first 20 or so laps. Chris Hill and Joseph Pizzacchiota, 27th and 28th, with Jared Torres and Jesse Atkinson bookending the top 30.
And then we'll have some more further back looking to try and stay out of trouble early on. Justin Lowry and Rocky Boyd, Chris James and Timmy Pacioli, with Alan Ballacino. He was third in this race a year ago. Going to be trying to repeat that feat from 35th on the grid. Brad Newman with him on the 17th row.
That is a look top to bottom at your iRacing starting grid, and admittedly, the tale of the tape doesn't need to be spelt out, guys. We are going racing 200 laps and 500 miles around this NASCAR Tri-Oval at the Daytona International Speedway. It has been a staple on the calendar in NASCAR racing since 1959. Massive 31-degree and 3-story tall banked corners to get around this place. Also 18 degrees of banking in the Tri-Oval. It goes right back to the point we said off at the top. 36 cars will enter this race. I highly doubt 36 of them are going to make it all the way to the end. There is always that adrenaline and that ambition that you feel brave, you feel like a hero. Can you lose the race on lap 1? Yeah, can't win it though. So these drivers are going to have to pace themselves, and these Daytona 500s are not always, Arjuna, the same year by year. We'll learn pretty quick, I think, into this race what the theme of 2023 will be.
And remember, this is a car that now a lot of these drivers have a full year of experience in, just like they now have in the real world. Setups will have come forward, understanding how these cars build up in a pack and how you'll run to the line coming to the final lap of the race. We'll see if green-white checkers play their part. So much excitement as we get ready to go once again.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll see a real mix of strategy here in the early stages too. There will be those who want to get up there and have their moment in the limelight, race for the race lead. There'll be some for sure who drop to the back and try to play it safe in the early stages.
We're looking forward to seeing how this one shakes out, and we're happy that you're joining us on the iRacing Esports Network. Pace car down and in. The field is in the hands of the 7 of Nicholas Vroman as we say, let's go racing. This is the iRacing Daytona 500. Second time down the Daytona Super Stretch, lap number 1 led by Chris Wilhite. You saw the turquoise 30 of Colton J. Harvey go 3 wide early. He is quick to jump back down the inside line, and they are side by side, both through the field. On board, third car in line here on the inside of the racetrack. That's the 7, your pole sitter, Nicholas Vroman. He's gotten passed up by both Wilhite and the 18, Justin Levine, as they draft to the race lead.
Nice tidy start. Interesting to note how many cars elected not to set a qualifying time, but already are trying to work their way forward in a pack to try and ensure that they don't get dropped potentially in what may be long green flag runs, with fuel windows expected to go anywhere from 42 to 48 laps.
Big run coming on the high side now. It does seem to take a couple of laps sometimes to get that top lane going, but it's really starting to move towards the front now. See, being led there by the number 2, Garrett Maines, getting a huge push. He was eager to get up into that high line, hadn't even got into turn 1 on the green flag lap, and he was chopping lanes, and he's almost made his way to the front.
Going to learn quick, like we said, how many drivers want to be aggressive. That over 50% of the field in this race opted not to take a time into qualifying. I think it'll be an indication as well as how many drivers want to play it safe in this race also. And you'll see those drivers who want to ride in the middle, stay in touch, tail end of the lead pack, and how many drivers want to go out there and lead as many of the 200 laps as they can. Garrett Maines going to get that push on the outside, aided by Tommy Gossett, and the 2 car all the way clear of the inside. Does he make the side step down? Yes, he does. So Maines goes to the lead, drops down. Might not even get a lap led out of it, though, because Tommy Gossett going to stay to the outside, and Joseph Joffis is going to give him the push off at turn number 4, and the 20 cars looking to lead lap 4.
Yeah, Joseph, the man so powerful, they named him twice. Building with Tommy Gossett to run away at the front. Not so important really to see who is breaking away here, but this is all just in understanding who you can work with to make sure that as we build to the halfway stage, to the 150 lap marker, you know who you can work with if you've still got to work your way to the front to put yourself in a position to be there at the end.
And working out really where you want to be on the racetrack. These next-gen cars handle very differently on the top than they handle on the bottom. Some drivers may have a setup that works better on one than the other. They may have a driving style that works better on one than the other. Looks like right now, though, the inside line's starting to form a little bit better, and we've got 5 or 6 cars on the inside single file.
One thing we saw last night in the season opener for the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, the fact that both the inside and the outside can work as the lanes of dominance. Early in that race, outside was the better place to be, was able to pull the significant advantage. Early in this race, though, the bottom, the place to be. You can see the lead 7 or so cars that have broken away being on that inside line. The lead car up top, the 31 machine, Tyler Justice, 10th on track right now. Now, don't expect the inside to be on cruise control all night long. That's going to ebb and flow and fluctuate. It is a very competitive and a pretty even draft package as well, which gives these drivers option. There is not one lane that is a clear favorite over the other, and therefore you're not going to have 90% of the field trying to go to one certain spot on track. Drivers are going to be able to use, admittedly, the first 190 laps of this race to experiment. Not only who can I work with if I don't have teammates in here, who's willing to work, who's a good pusher, who can I push comfortably, does a late move work here, can I change lanes into the corner, out of the corner, center of the corner, how aggressive can I push on corner exit. There's a long R&D session, which makes up really the majority of this 200 lap race distance.
And of course this is open setup competition, so they've come in with some sort of expectation for what they want their car to do, but not always really fully understanding how it's going to evolve over the course of the race. And of course, as our track conditions change as well, we'll take a look at them over here. Mostly cloudy, so it's a pretty cool day, pretty ideal for racing. And of course, in this type of racing, Andy, it's all about managing your temperatures.
Absolutely, especially if you are the pusher. So we're seeing Joseph on the inside line, really pushing Tommy Gossett pretty much right around the 2.5 mile super speedway, just drops off him slightly into turn 1. You have to do that. If you stay fully attached for more than a lap or so, your oil temperature starts to climb and you do run the risk of blowing the engine, and that really will become significant late in the race. That is the way to push your way to the front or establish yourself at the front of the pack, by pushing and working with someone, but you can only do it for so long.
And the outside, it creeps into the picture, still led by that 31 of Justice. You have the 18 to Bashida, Justin Levine up on the outside. Sean Powell is up in the mix as well. And there's the onboard perspective of your lead car on the outside. Justice just trying to do as best he can to hold the wheel steady. And really, if you're somebody receiving the push, your objective is to be predictable, right? These races are determined based on iRacing split. You're not necessarily guaranteed to be amongst teammates, although most of the time you'll have a pretty good idea of who you'll be racing against, because it's the same people you're racing against at NIS every single week in the strength of field competitions. But if you're drafting, especially with somebody who you haven't done it with before, you need to feel that relationship out, and being predictable is so key. You saw the 18 backed off in the corner. You're seeing the same thing on the bottom, right? The 11 of Joseph backs off of the back bumper of Tommy Gossett. Then when they get off the corner and head to the short chute here in between 4 and the tri-oval, you have to push again. Now, there's so much banking in the tri-oval, it's essentially a 5th turn, and it can get a little bit sketchy at times pushing through the tri-oval, but drivers seem pretty comfortable through the opening 10 at pushing on that part of the racetrack. Still not really willing to do that in the corners yet, but call us again in 150 laps. That might be a different story.
But to your point on a lot of these names being familiar, like I mentioned, my teammate Adam Blocker running in this race, but a handful of other IndyCar crossovers, Adriano Pinheiro being one of them, Chris Wilhite running up in 5th, someone who has plenty of experience in this car, but a lot of our viewers at RaceSpotTV will know him more in that IR18 with his team, the Indy Alliance Racing. So I wonder how they're going to be able to work maybe amongst themselves. They're kind of split up amongst the pack right now, but it's always interesting when you have this race that attracts people from around the world that come and join it. Andy, for example, has already attempted a Daytona 500 today and finished it, in fact.
I did indeed. Thank you for subtly dropping that in on me, Gina. Yeah, top 6 finish, which I was very, very happy with. But really, that's down to luck as much as judgment. Honestly, you've got to miss those big wrecks. And yeah, you've got to make friends where you can. To your point about working with teammates, that's something I've always found really difficult in this style of racing. Even if it's not a teammate, it's just someone you want to work with and you enjoy working with, it's almost impossible to stay with them for 200 laps. At some point, you'll be separated, and then you've got to make your friends where you can find them, and you have to be able to adapt on the fly.
So today is your Daytona 1000. I'll give credit to you on that for doubling up on the 500 miles apiece. And something else about the direction of oval racing here on the service, you're seeing out the NASCAR schedule as well as shorter races, right? Not necessarily sprints, but quick races, quick decisions, and every move you make is impactful, right? You're looking at maybe 1 or 2 green flag pit stops in most cases. Of course, these full-length events, kick that trend, and it's a very different kind of race. Not only do you have to be more patient to survive, but listen, it also takes a lot more focus to not put a foot wrong over the course of, say, 3.5 hours over the, instead of an hour and a half. So these drivers as well need to be mentally prepared. They're up on the wheel right now. There is no doubt about that. It is early in this race. They are sharp and they're good to go. Get to lap 120, 130, right? Are they still in it? And at any point, even if you're only side by side, I say with air quotes here, it looks like they have a decent amount of space, right? You move up 3 feet, 4 feet in the corner just from a slight momentary lapse in judgment, and it can be all gone for you and 30 of your closest friends who are in the same pack with you too. So there's a lot of trust throughout the field. Even if you're not necessarily working together, it's a group effort here, trying to get all these cars through this race. And I think the first big milestone would be the initial cycle of green flag service, if we can get there as we continue now through lap number 13.
Have some lap traffic to deal with in the form of Brad Newman as well, who's running in 36th position. He'll cycle somewhere through the field. Be their first bit of drama to work their way past. To your point, 500 miles at Daytona is maybe the most stressful 500 miles that you can get. You're managing your temps, you're trying to be in the right places, you're managing your side drafts, pushing as much as you can, watching in the rearview mirror to make sure you don't get a shot that's going to force you a little bit too much. And so all of these add up to make it not an easy 500 miles by any means. A lot of people will just look at it and say, oh, you're turning left. I can say from personal experience, it's anything but that.
This is one of the hardest forms of racing out there, even when they're running single file. Oh, we've had some drama off turn 2 by the looks of it. A couple of cars in trouble, and in fact more drama off turn 4. This could be our first yellow flag of the race.
So far, the yellow hasn't come out. You saw a brief glimpse of Alex Murray up against the inside wall off of turn number 4. Not sure what happened with him, but there were 2 cars onto the apron, guys, and I think that's in addition to drama after there was another incident down in turns 1 and 2 earlier on that same lap. So maybe it's the curse of lap 13, or maybe it's because I started talking about green flag pit stops, but 2 incidents on lap 14 of this race just about shook things up. Let's take a look at what happened top side of your screen. This is the initial incident. It was a checkup on the outside that just accordioned everybody, and that's a couple of big hits for some drivers involved in that accident, including the number 19 machine right there who gets hooked hard into the outside wall. Taking the brunt of that was Joseph Picata. That's what happened down in 1 and 2, and then of course we saw something else happen far into the racetrack in 3 and 4 with 2 cars going off and into the inside wall.
Oh, that's Tyler Justice, who was the one being pushed, wasn't it, at the very front of the field, and maybe a bit of a over-aggressive push as they worked their way off of the corner, of course, with the lap traffic to play with as well, and he tags a car down low, the 36, who could do nothing but watch Alex Murray in that incident.
Yeah, I think that lap car definitely had something to do with that. They had to duck underneath it just coming off the banking at turn 4, and that will have subtly altered their line. They've been running nose to tail pretty much since the drop of the green flag. They were in a rhythm, in a routine. Suddenly you have to alter your line only by a couple of feet to the left or right, and that can throw things off. And I think as they made the transition off the banking, they perhaps tried to hook bumpers again, and they weren't quite in the right spot. That is probably the most treacherous spot on this racetrack, especially up high. The cars get really free on corner exit there, and if you do lock bumpers at the wrong time, that's what can happen.
Obviously did not heed the warning when I was talking about pushing in the short chutes on the backstretch, and maybe we'll push in the corners at about 100 laps or so, I think is the comment I made. I don't think they listened to that and got a little bit too over anxious. And again, it's easy to do that. That line is so thin, you can go from riding around, leaving a safe gap, to just pushing a little bit too aggressively so easily. That it really can, again, flip a race on its head just like that. And, you know, we talk about the attrition in this race. That's going to be a big factor. Those 2 incidents have already knocked a couple of cars out of this race. Balacino, Piscata, and Atkinson on pit road, trying to get those cars repaired to get back onto the racetrack. But it's not just that. It's split this entire field up. Your lead pack is 21 cars strong. That's what you're looking at on the top of your screen. But then 22nd on back are those fragmented packs of the cars who were either minorly involved in those other accidents, or just simply had to slow down to avoid the accidents. 13 seconds back is where you find Ruckman, DeMerchant, Hayes, and Hill, and there's a similar pack 26th on back with Blocker and Langford. So a lot of drivers find themselves way out of touch very early.
Yeah, and hoping for maybe more drama up at the top of the field and have the potential to have the ability to catch up and be stacked up through the rest of the pack. A lot of the cars look pretty clean, it's fair to say, so I don't think they have too many concerns about damage on their cars and having to work on them in the cycle of pit stops. It's just now being caught out by the way that the iRacing automated caution system, Andy, unfortunately decided that the wrecks were happening down low and therefore not worthy of us needing a caution.
Okay, which is excellent news for the leaders who have strung out single file as a result of that little bit of action, but terrible news for those on the bottom half of your screen, because as we've been saying, they've lost the draft and they're going to really struggle to get that back. 4 cars, even working together really efficiently, are not going to be able to bridge that sort of gap. But Evan, that is the risk that you take here at Daytona. There were those drivers, we said it, didn't we, at the start, who probably started at the back, one car way up into the wall off turn 2. Some drivers who started at the back of the pack to try and avoid the trouble. Well, the first of those wrecks going into turn 1, that probably exclusively affected cars in the bottom third of the field. There is no truly safe place in the pack.
Yeah, that is the true irony in this, right? Because if you want to be far enough back that you are safe from an accident, then you cannot be in the lead pack. The issue there is if you're not in the lead pack, unless you've got a group of 20 people hanging back there, you're not going to be at speed. And if you have enough cars to match the speed of the lead pack, then are you really safe? You're just in an equally as dangerous pack. So it really is a fickle beast here at Daytona, as the 18 car going to go to the outside and how about for a moment some 3 wide. Justin Levine forcing the issue. It goes back down to 2 wide, but you're exactly right. You hang out at the back of the lead pack to try to be safe. but that's exactly where that incident came from. And then the second of which came off of turn 4 with the aggressive drivers who were fighting for the lead. They also wrecked. So truly nowhere to be safe. That's why sometimes you need a lot of skill, but also I think equally as much good luck if you're going to win a crown jewel iRacing special event like this one.
Can we talk about the skill of Garrett Maines to hold on to his car as Chris Wilhite gave him a push out of turn number 4. Rear end stepping around on him, but he snaps it back into line and keeps it pointed in the right direction. We are starting to see more and more the outside line being hooked up. Not sure if that's necessarily as much cars having struggles getting loose and tight down low. One thing to consider, and one thing that we saw yesterday in the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series race here, is that drivers want to be up on the wall as much as possible, because if you get cars coming down to your right rear and taking the air off it, Andy, the side draft can be quite significant.
Yeah, that side draft really powerful in these next-gen cars, and to the point that actually if someone gets on your right rear corner, it starts to alter the trajectory of your car. It sort of sucks you up the hill into them. So easy to start making contact in that way, and we all know where that can lead. But yeah, that momentum on the outside line, it really seems to be generated not necessarily by cars which are running the outside line. It's coming from cars jumping out of that inside line. They get the run, they pull up high, they get some friends to go with them, and a two-car tandem essentially down that back stretch seems to be what's working. That was what it took there for Levian and Hogan to take the lead away from Garrett Maines. Let's see now if they can hold on to it.
Trying to form a little bit of a lead pack up here. The outside still hanging tough. Again, it is still a massive 21-car lead draft as you look off the back of your race leader. That's Boyd Hogan tucked up underneath, and there's a good look at this whole group as they continue to extend their race lead over that secondary pack, 22nd on back, who is now 16 seconds off of the pace. It is highly unlikely, if I was an odds maker, I would say that this race goes without a yellow, but the longer it goes green, the worse the story is going to get for all those cars in the second and third and fourth packs, because once you get a lap down, and once there are multiple cars a lap down in a race like this, it is truly difficult to get back into the conversation as we see the 34 now. How about Kyle Perry leading the outside line, pushed by the 23 machine. Chris Peffert into the outside wall he goes. Right on cue. It's a problem for Kyle Perry, and that one looked like he just got loose on his own, and it snapped up into the outside wall. There is no yellow, but that is a massive shot for the 34.
I think a lot of the drivers here are going to be wondering, what is it going to take to trigger a yellow, especially given what we saw yesterday with some of the cautions in that NASCAR race. But all it takes is one little moment, but once again it proves that it takes a few laps for the outside line to build up its momentum, and then once it does, Andy, sometimes it comes unstuck.
Yeah, because to build that momentum, you have to push, and the 34 car has damage. Clearly, that is going to be end of race, potentially, certainly multiple laps lost. To generate that momentum, you've got to push hard, and you really want to connect bumpers as soon as you possibly can off the corner. But like I said before, that high line coming off turn 4, coming off turn 2, super treacherous. This, though, I don't think was a bump draft gone wrong. It does look as though the 34 just got loose on his own. Kyle Perry, we're going to see him here heading off into turn 3. He's being given the bumper. It's coming off 4 where things are going to go wrong, and on that high line especially, Evan, so easy to lose the rear end.
And let's watch from high above as they come off of 4. He's got plenty of space behind and next to him, and just on his own. Race car gets a little bit upset. These cars might be pretty trimmed out. You'll hear talks about handling more so in a Daytona race than you would say at its counterpart in Talladega. And it was just on his own, lost it a little bit. And that snap up into the outside wall is essentially going to end his race. You saw him off into the grass later after the accident. He has taken a toe to pit road. And after challenging for the race lead, Perry's Daytona 500 has come to a close. Ballacino, some other drivers as well, officially going to the garage and retiring short of just past 1/8 distance through this race. A long way to go, and a lot can still happen, but that moment, that scare, hasn't deterred the lead pack from racing. It's next man up, and it's Colton J. Harvey in the number 30 Chevrolet, leading outside, still with Chris Peffert pushing him from behind. We'll see if the 30 has some more success. That's the kind of turquoise-looking Camaro up top, and he got loose that time into the tri-oval, but he's able to reel it back in.
They are really wheeling these cars, not just with the amount of sliding up and down through the lines, but just because of through the course of the bump draft, you can see the impact it's having on the cars. 36 starters now, though, taken down to just 20 cars in this leading pack as we are now past 25 laps done in this race. Starting to see some attrition. The outside line really linking up now, and 4 cars streaking their way into turn number 3.
Yeah, heads up driving there though from Hogan and Mains. They saw that run coming on the high side. They went high and sort of left the 18 of Justin Levine down low. He couldn't find a gap on the high line, and now all of a sudden it looks like the top is the place to be. But eventually someone will get bored, someone will duck down low, and this might be their opportunity. They're coming up to lap the first sort of sizable pack of cars, 4 or 5 cars on that inside line. They'll be giving a bit of a draft to the cars running down low. That's an advantage for now, but at some point, Evan, they've got to find a way past them.
They really do, and this is going to be an interesting moment here as the field is going to catch up to and put Jesse Atchison a 12th lap down, because everything's going to have to funnel 3 wide. He'll stay low, so the bottom lane has to go to the middle. 4 of them will clear before they get off to the corner. It's going to be up to the 8 of Dalton Collins to slither on through. Now the 21 of Jared Torres will try to do the same, and admittedly, a pretty smart move there from Atchison, because it kind of force feeds himself to blend into the pack here, although I think damage means that he might fall off at the back end anyways. But you're going to notice that in this race as well. White, would it make more sense for the lapped cars to go way to the outside of the racetrack and get out of the way? Sure, but if they kind of make themselves a little bit of a hazard, they can get sucked into the lead draft much quicker. That can aid their position if they're looking for a lucky dog on a later yellow flag in the race. The 18 of Machida Justin Levine looked to go 3 wide there, didn't do it, but tell you what, I'm thinking I'm putting on the 18 on the aggressor list early in this race. He's always looking for a lane, even when it seems like he's in a good spot. And we got some more lap traffic coming up as Justin Lowry and Chris James going to be taken up by the lead pack here. Let's see how the 36 navigates this.
Yeah, and they join Alex Murray, Tyler Justice, and Adriano Pinheiro, Brad Newman, all in that low lane right now, just trying to hold on to technically a spot in the lead lap if they play their cards right. It's all about, they don't want to fight too hard, but like you were saying, Evan, trying to stay in this leading pack and put themselves in the position where maybe they wouldn't need the lucky dog. If there was to be a caution in what is now a expanding lead pack once again, with traffic building it back up.
Yeah, absolutely. They're doing what they have to keep their race on track, but they're not really making any friends on that inside lane, or the outside, actually, because remember, Boyd Hogan, Garrett Mains, Colton Harvey, they had a good thing going up top, but all of a sudden, they are not the cars at the front of this group. They might still be up there fighting for the race lead, but they've got traffic ahead of them, and traffic clearly is going to fight for track position here to try and stay in contention. Those drivers praying for a yellow now to try and cycle back round fully onto the lead lap, as the 18 car does actually now move into the lead.
Levine back to the #1 spot in this race, but again, he is only the 6th car in line currently on the bottom of the racetrack. Pinheiro, Justice, Murray, James, and Lowry are the lapped cars that aren't really lapped cars, right? They're currently ahead of your race leaders, so as they run, they're scored on the lead lap. Now, the tricky spot here for Levine is he's not getting that benefit of leading a line. He's essentially the 6th car in position right here. The 5 of Boyd Hogan up top's got a real good look here to overtake him for the race lead, and courtesy with a push from the 2 car, he will do so at the start-finish line. So Boyd Hogan going to lead his 4th lap of this early and young iRacing Daytona 500. The 2, the 30, the 28, and the 16 helping out there, but now there's really nothing the 18 car can do. He's boxed in, cars in front, behind, and next to him. He is along for the ride.
And they are very much along for the ride now in terms of what they have underneath them with the 4 contact patches on the ground, the Goodyear tires. Get about 10 laps in, tires become lava, and we are 33 laps in with only about 10 laps to go before likely to enter a fuel window. And so you can see them wiggling around. It's not just because they're trying to manage the temperatures, it's because the tires are shrieking as well.
Yeah, you can see the way that they're all really struggling to hold their line through the turns, especially when they start pushing each other through those turns. The tyres just not giving them the grip that they want, not just on corner entry and exit now, but all the way through. The car's sort of wandering around, the rear tyres really feeling like they're sliding. and there will be conversations going on now about pit stops as well. Everyone in this pack will have a slightly different fuel mileage based on how they've been playing things so far, but we're not that far away, Evan, from our first round of green flag pit stops, and ideally they'd like to be single file for that. I don't see that happening.
And that's where the inability to kind of have a private radio channel with a, set of 3, 4 team cars, even more, if you talk about some of the bigger technical alliances that you see in the world of NASCAR, could be tricky. These drivers, if you're not familiar with the iRacing service, have the ability to just send a text chat or a voice chat to everybody in the sim right now. They could also try to message somebody individually, but again, a little bit trickier than if you know who you're racing with every single week. So the objective for green flag pit stops at a racetrack like Daytona is you want to pit with enough cars, but not too many cars. And that breaks down as, if you pit on your own, not a good place to be, because you're going to leave on your own. You're not going to have drafting partners. It's going to be a net loss on that cycle. Now, if you pit with too many cars, pit road's going to be congested. You're more likely to deal with checkups and lockups into and out of pit road. That slows you down too. So it's really interesting to see. And this first one, if they get there, is going to be a good indication of what the leaders are thinking about. Not only will it be tricky to get single file, Argina, I think that is added on to by the fact that the cars on the bottom are lapped cars. So it's not even like, the lead lap cars could make a decision. They're kind of at the mercy of those lapped cars who have kind of parked the bus right there on the bottom and continue to lead that inside line.
And don't forget that pit entry here is a high-speed roller coaster. You come off the banking and you hope that you've got some brakes and you hope you can get down through the gears. It's in the benefit of the cars who are fighting to stay now on the lead lap. As whoa, there's a handful having issues. I think that was Pinheiro who's going to dip down low and say, I don't need to be a part of that ride anymore. But it does mean that the cars that were fighting to be on the lead lap lose a whole bunch of momentum and now very much get swallowed on up. I was going to say that they want to try and make life difficult for the lead lap cars. It's going to be harder to do so now.
Yeah, that was a lucky escape. Another car getting loose off turn 4. That is going to end in disaster at some point in this race, I guarantee it. But how quickly things change. That one slight change in the momentum has now cleared 4 of our lead lap cars to the front. They immediately went down to the bottom of the track because they knew that these pit stops are coming up shortly. And yeah, this is an ideal situation for them. I think this group at the front will definitely look to stop together. You really don't want to have a congested run onto that pit road, though. To Arjuna's points, the brakes do not work when you come in after 40 green flag laps. The tyres do not give you any grip. So easy to slide those tyres, and if you're coming down 3 and 4 wide, that will end in tears.
And unfortunately for us, as that outside line gets a little bit out of line into the corner, it's going to settle down, no incident there, but a bit of a close call, as it just seems like they can't get lined up with one another. Is that the math is pretty simple on this, right? If assuming that everybody can hit that number of 40, then you're going to be coming down to pit road 4 times in this race, around lap 40, around 80, 120, 160, and that's so you can split this race into even fifths. And there is not enough discrepancy or leniency in that fuel window to worry about one group making less of a stop than another. It is pretty uniform, this pit strategy here in a race like this.
Yeah, the main thing that you are also expecting in a race where you're going to have cautions is you're just hoping to keep yourself in the ballpark. If there is going to be green flag runs and by some miracle there's no cautions, then yes, it would be beneficial if you had been able to save the most amount of fuel and being in the best position at the end of the race, but it doesn't matter if you save a lot of fuel and you come out without any sort of help. Pitting at Daytona is all about compromise and about having cars around you. Pinheiro, for example, pitting by himself is now going to be absolutely swallowed up by the pack because he is nowhere near the same amount of speed as them, and he'll be lucky to latch onto the back.
Yeah, I feel sorry for him, actually. I don't think he intended to pit, just got sort of spat out of line. We do have one taker, and that looked a little bit too quick on pit entry for Adam Blocker, but the number 15 car will head towards its pit bay. Again, an interesting choice there to come in on his own. A safer run into the pit lane, maybe. We've got trouble through 1 and 2, though. One car sideways back into the pack. Surely they didn't save it. I think they did.
And that one looked like it might have been the 12 car again of Steele Langford. When I mentioned the outside had some issues a few laps ago getting lined up, it was the 12 who looked a bit out of shape for the second time consecutively. He almost wrecked that race car. Looked like it was on his own. We'll catch up with what happened with a second look in just a moment, but there is a lot of chatter, and right on the money at lap number 40, green flag pit stops, and look out because here they come. Contact between the 20 and the 2. It is a mad dash as everybody tries to slow down to 60 miles an hour, and there is a car spun around towards the back end of pit road as somebody got turned on pit entry. Couple of cars going to get some minor damage in this one, but they all make it onto the asphalt.
Only 5 cars staying out. Vermont, Joseph, Torres, Gossett, and Wilhite. The rest of the field find their way onto pit lane. Other than the scrambles at the back, I think the vast majority at the front were able to get through safely, and winning the race off of pit lane will be Hogan in front of Harvey White with Maines and Kraneborg behind.
Yeah, could have been a lot worse there. One car was on the grass, one car got spun, but actually not too much contact. Let's see now, though, whether this splits the pack a little bit. These green flag pit stops do have a tendency sometimes to do that. The second pack of cars in, and this looks a lot more orderly, doesn't it? Just 5 cars in together, and they will certainly have gained some time on pit entry. These cars, of course, still trying to get themselves up to speed as we get a second look at what could easily have been a big one through 1 and 2.
Another instance of a car getting loose on its own, but to give credit where it is due, what a piece of driving to recover that race car by the driver of the 12 machine in Steele Langford, because that was almost a guaranteed incident. Now, the second group is coming off the pit road. One driver that is missing from this group is Nicholas Vroman. He was leading this pack as they came onto pit road, guys, but he put 2 tires in the grass on pit road entry. He has been slapped with a penalty, so all the cars that he had pitted with drive away, and he sits in pit stall to serve that penalty. That is a huge and critical mistake.
It's so easy to do as well, and we were just talking about the difficulty of slowing these cars down and doing it effectively. These drivers want to make sure they're really being efficient and maximizing the pit stop cycles, and it's so important to get better and to build your confidence up so that when we get to the final cycle of pit stops, you are at your very best to get down, hit your mark, and then run at the speed limit for the entirety of pit lane, find your way into the box, and roll off without any sort of drama.
And when you get to those later pit stops, the pressure really is on not to make a mistake. Don't speed coming in. Don't slide through your pit stall, because it's far too late then to get that back. At least at this early stage, you've got a fighting chance of getting back in contention. Look at the way that this has split the pack, though. We've got a 5-car breakaway at the front, of which only 4 of them are actually lead lap cars, and then a good couple of seconds or so back to the next group. Now, this group behind need to get themselves ordered. They're not really running in any sort of order right now. They're losing more time to the lead pack. The sooner they get single file and work together, the better their chance of closing back in on that leading group.
And what this has done as well is it's kind of subtracted those lapped cars away from this battle. They're no longer, right in the middle of it all, a little bit of 3 wide through the corner for your race leaders as they try to deal with a little bit of lap traffic through the field. But it really has spread the field out. Look at the intervals, right? You got this lead pack of 4 and then a 3-second gap back to Torres and company. 15th is some 14 seconds back. Before we pitted, the lead pack was 21 cars deep. Right now, 4 cars involved in it, plus a lapped car hanging on as well to the back end.
Yeah, and we're going to grab a look at what happened here on that mad dash on towards pit lane, and it actually kind of kicks off in the very front. There's plenty of lockups of the brake further back and then ping-ponging off the wall initially. But if we take a look from up above, you can see that the checkup's kind of in front, and then someone trying to send it all the way on the outside gets it off to the grass, some 3 and 4 wide. Pit entry here at Daytona is always a mad scramble.
Yeah, it was the 13, I think, of Clayton Hoffman who locked up on the inside, actually bounced off the inside retaining wall and spun another car. He's still running in 14th spot, so clearly not too much damage, and got away without a penalty there, but a real example of just how treacherous that pit entry can be. Things continuing to look settled at the front of the pack right now, but the one advantage I think, Evan, that second group has is strength in numbers. As long as they get organised here, look at the size of that pack further back. I do think they've got what it takes to close in on the leading group, but they continue to run side by side.
And the bonus cars in this lead pack are going to help them balance out that indifference a little bit, right? They've got Alex Murray on the front of that lead pack, which is on the top of your screen. He is the last car on the lead lap. And then on the back end of the group, you've also got Eric Royce and Nicholas Vroman. They are the first and second cars 1 lap down. So there's 4 cars on the lead lap in that group, but it's a 7-car pack. That could help a lot because as you look to that secondary group, that is a pack of about 7 to 8 drivers in the battle for 5th position. So can those lap cars help balance things out a little bit? I think overall that second pack is going to get there by numbers alone, but lap times will be the best indication. Boyd Hogan leading this lead group last lap, put down a 46.094. It was a 45.978 for the 5th placed car in Jared Torres. So ever so slightly, that second pack is quicker, and they chip and chip away on the lead.
We are going to see a bit of a swap around, and we are going to see Boyd Hogan now lead at the front of this leading queue as the lapped car pulls aside, and see if this is the opportunity to improve lap times. Remember, a 1/10 of a second here and there means a 3-second deficit is going to take 30 laps to come on down and basically cycle us to another pit stop cycle entry, in which case, what are we going to see? We're going to see that mad scramble, start all over again, and the field splintered up once more.
The one thing I will say to that, though, is that you start to pick up that draft from maybe a second and a half back, sometimes even further back if you're coming with some momentum from those behind. So really, Torres is just looking to try and break into that window, pick up a whiff of the draft from the front group, and then that last second tends to disappear pretty quickly. And the other thing that allows is the second group to really pick up momentum. So not only do they catch the leading cars, but they often have a chance to carry that momentum up to the high line and try to make their way to the front.
And there's a good look on board. You're looking up to Jared Torres from the perspective of Joseph, the driver out of New Jersey, is doing his very best to push and propel this second group to catch the race leaders. They've got it all the way down to about 2.5 seconds. The other thing is, not all laps are made equal, right? The closer they get to the lead pack, the more of that draft wake they're going to pick up off of those leaders. So they're actually going to be a little bit better off every single lap. Once they can break into about the 2 to 2.5 range, they're really going to reap the benefits. But again, there's lapped cars in the lead pack. That lead pack has been just as organized, and they're going to do everything they can to not let that second group of race cars catch up to them.
And you'll note the 15 of Adam Blocker tucked in third in line in the second group of cars. He got a speeding penalty when we saw him peel off and pit by himself a little bit earlier on. It means he's now 2 laps down from the field, and while we do have a handful 1 lap down battling to be the lucky dog if we get a caution, the free wave around, but for Adam Blocker, a lot more work to do if he's going to be in a position come the end of this race in about hopefully 2 hours time when we're flying to the checkered flag to be fighting for victory.
Yeah, nearly a quarter of the way through this race already. It has flown by with, touch wood, no cautions just yet, but that is a good point you make, actually, and I think that Blocker, he really has to try and get one of these laps back on the track. He has extra incentive here to try and close in on that lead group, because 1 lap, yeah, you can take a couple of wave around, you might get a lucky dog here and there, but 2 laps, that becomes a lot harder to do. Really, you want to try and race your way to the front, catch a lucky caution, and that could be your ticket back onto the lead lap eventually. So he's certainly quite happy to ride along at the moment. They're setting some good lap times, continuing to take a 1/10 of a second or so a lap out of this lead group. Give them another 6 or 7 laps, and they might just be there.
An additional thing here, strategy-wise, guys, that's being discussed over the radio right now is the fuel number for the lead cars in this pack. Boyd Hogan, Colton Harvey, Garrett Maines are all discussing how much gas they have left, and it seems a little bit early to talk about that, right? We just came off of pit road, but again, we talked about those splits. They pitted at 40. They want to get to 80, our junior. Right now, Garrett Maines estimates that Boyd Hogan leading this pack, right, getting no draft advantage. There's no car in front of him breaking up the air. He is going to be about 2 laps short on fuel to make it to the lap number 80 marker. So what I anticipate is at some point during this run, they're going to swap the 5 car out with the 2. That car's been able to save fuel being third in line, make a swap so that they can all hit that lap number 80 marker.
It's nice if it works, but you're always enemies out on the racetrack, and even if you are going to swap around, you want to make sure they're not swapping into maybe as beneficial a spot as possible. It is a major thing to think about, though, because you are literally foot to the floor if you're at the front of the field, whereas you are driving like you've got an egg underneath the throttle pedal if you're behind, just trying to feather it to balance how close you are to the car in front versus not hitting it too hard and not getting your temperatures out of line. As for a moment I wondered if we were going to see Harvey step out of line in that teal number 30 behind. They're really starting to catch, and the gap now down to 1.8 seconds.
I'll tell you what, I'm adding Garrett Maines onto that aggressors list. He's getting so close to the back of Colton Harvey's car. That is important to do. He's actually doing it perfectly here. Not quite touching the back of the 30, just packing some air onto the rear of the 30 car. That propels Harvey into the back of Hogan and ultimately makes the whole group go quicker. But it's when Garrett starts to lock bumpers with that number 30 car that I get nervous. Just here coming off 4, gets so close. You don't push the pusher. That is always going to cause trouble. And Garrett Maines is not afraid to lay a bumper to that second place car.
Well, we are past 1/4 distance in this Thursday evening or Wednesday evening, getting ahead of myself, split here of the iRacing Daytona 500. You've been seeing it from our perspective. Now let's take it in from the perspective of the drivers and go iRacing full throttle at the world's center of racing. And a caution off of turn number 4, the 32 machine involved in this one as Travis Kraneborg was not happy over the radio. And no surprise, he was the driver that went around. He was running in 7th position. And what happened? He was spun around off of turn number 4. He feels wrong. Let's see, guys, if he was. 4th in line as they head off the 3. We talked about this potential split coming. The 15 moved high, tried to come back down, but then Travis filled the gap.
Yeah, I think this is the inexperience maybe from Blocker showing, and then as he tries to slot back into line, 2 laps down. I hate to dunk it onto my teammate, but Adam Blocker is responsible for a murder.
Yeah, it really sounded like you didn't want to say that, Arjuna. I mean, there wasn't a gap, really, was there? He comes down. In fairness, the cars move around so much. I mentioned this earlier. That side draft's so powerful, and I think that perhaps that's what happened. Adam there starts to merge down. He's trying to find that gap in line. Can't quite do it there, so then he thinks, right, I'll slot down behind the 15, and at that point, the wheel gets light coming off the corner anyway. The side draft takes effect. It perhaps wasn't quite as blatant as it might have looked.
It's a tough break, and I think that even as a lead lap car, a tricky position to be in, but I think if you're a lapped car as well, you have to give a little bit of extra yield to those lead lap cars, and certainly understand the frustration with Kraneborg there because he was in 7th spot. That secondary pack was, doing what they needed to do to close in on the race leaders, and now all of a sudden, there's a yellow flag, and that breakaway and advantage that they had is all but evaporated. The yellow comes out with 22 cars on the lead lap. Most everybody down and in for service. All of your leaders are going to get serviced up. Drag race off of pit road in favor of, was it the 2 of Garrett Maines? Yes, it was. Maines will go and lead out of pit road. A 7.9 second pit stall for him as he came down for fuel only. But this screws up that nice, easy fuel number. I talked about how the math would be real easy on us, guys. Well, now it is not so clear because we are no longer even pit runs away from the end of this race. So first yellow flag in the books. It took till quarter distance.
And they never come at a good time, do they? They always come at an interesting time. You've been talking about lap 40. Some of the numbers from some of the drivers I've been talking about are anywhere from 42 to 48 laps. So there is the potential to save more if you truly want to. The question is it going to be worth it? And is that really the strategy that you are thinking that you want to play out? Rocky Boyd has come to a stop on the back straightaway, and I'm not sure what's going on behind the wheel of the 25.
Yeah, that car is going nowhere, but doesn't seem to have any obvious damage, so perhaps a hardware failure or something gone wrong with the pit stop there that's meant that he stops on the track. But yeah, the timing of these cautions, right now it's not really the end of the world. The driver's fully aware that there will probably be another handful of cautions at least through the middle part of the race, but once you get down inside that last 60 laps or so, you're just praying really that you can get into that fuel window to make it to the end, because a caution with 50, 55 laps to go, that really makes the calculations that little bit more complicated, as well, that is simply pulling out of the way and almost giving up there. I don't think that was a hardware failure, that looked like a driver who just had enough.
Interesting, just waited until he had gotten past the pit exit cone and then pulled down to the inside of the racetrack. I've seen many drivers do that just to reposition their spots in the field. It could simply be the fact that Boyd had received a speeding penalty on pit road exit or some sort of infraction where he needed to give up his current track spot. He is rolling once more, but it is going to be significantly down the running order as he's going to be scored in 20th position. Also, quite the handful of wave-around cars. They're going to rejoin the lead lap. Alex Murray, Brad Newman, Tyler Justice, Timmy Piccoli. You got River Hayes, Chris James, and Steele Lankford. That group of 6 neglect to come down pit road. They will be waved around and rejoin the lead lap. So the lead lap will now have 28 cars on it, but those drivers are now going to be 17 laps or so out of cycle with everybody else on pit strategy because, well, they didn't pit again. So they've only pitted at lap 40. They're going to not be able to go significantly as far as all the cars that they're racing against. So that group banking on a somewhat quick yellow to make that decision to stay out and get the wave by worthwhile.
I think probably hoping for a 10-15 lap run, because then that would probably necessitate those that have already just come on down to come on in, hoping for a new set of tires. Remember, a tire set limit of 8, not really something you're too worried about in a 200 lap race here.
Indeed so. Green flag about to be waved again, and it's the 2 car that's found its way to the front. Garrett Maines, he's been an aggressive pusher so far. Now as he takes the green flag, he will be leading the field just past the 1/4 race distance mark.
Slice it and Dyson 3 wide down the back straightaway as the 5 of Boyd Hogan going to get swallowed up off into 3. On the outside line, it's Garrett Maines leading, pushed by the 30 of Harvey.
It was all, I think, about just the momentum being built out of turn 1 and 2. And once again, those in the middle being hung out to dry as DeMerchant further back is going to be swallowed up by the pack once more. 3 wide, not the name of the game, but it's 2 wide through the field with 1 green flag lap back under our belt.
Joseph tried to make the move to the bottom. Garrett Maines came down to cover, and actually that gives the momentum to the high side, and Colton Harvey will take the number 30 car and place it in the win. Pushed hard by Christopher Hill in the black number 17, but Harvey dropping immediately down to the bottom. It seems the high side is the place to pass, but the low side perhaps the place to ride.
And we'll see if that dynamic continues over the course of this race, or if it'll change. 25, a little bit squirrely, bit of a checkup on the outside of the racetrack as Rocky Boyd got misaligned with the 17 car in front of him. So now the inside pulls the advantage as it's Colton Harvey's turn to lead over top of Maines. We have seen already 8 different drivers lead a lap early in this Daytona 500, and maybe 3 wide into the corner. The 5 was thinking about it, and now the 23, and there's the spin, the 17. He'll turn up into the outside wall. The wrecking behind. DeMerchant's involved. The 24 car gets a piece also, but I don't think anybody went all the way around quite yet. They're still not done wrecking on the back straightaway, and finally, they tried so hard, and they finally got the yellow in one of the longest wrecks you'll ever see.
Yeah, someone paid for that yellow not to come out clearly for quite a while, or someone in race control was sleeping, because that went on for ages, and I have a feeling we're going to have plenty to cycle our way through, but what do they say? Cautions breed cautions, and those that gambled and were hoping for a quick and early yellow have been paid off and rewarded.
Almost immediately there, though, you could feel the aggression level had just built up. Those who had lost the draft early on, they knew that was their chance to get back into the race. They were on fresh tyres, so they were feeling pretty confident, a little too confident maybe, because that did lead to a little bit of aggression. It was the 17, I think, that went round in the first place, and it was the 17 there turning the 23 that ultimately brought the caution out. But exactly how they got there, Evan, well, we're about to find out.
We saw that de facto 3 wide there. The 23 is going to get forced out to the third lane, but watch the 17 in the middle of the corner, a bump draft, and it knocks him down to the inside line. That's where I thought the yellow was surely coming, as he was pushed up the hill and suplexed the car to his outside. And then as they go down the back straightaway, there's just damaged cars everywhere. DeMerchant gives an extra shove to somebody, and that looks like an extra shove as well, which has finally brought the yellow flag out. And I think that extra one probably could have been avoided unless something was broken on that 17 car.
I think Nim Cross is getting a message as soon as this race is done, if I'm being perfectly frank. Well, see, DeMerchant...
Look in the back, though, too.
Yeah,
DeMerchant, too.
I was going to say, DeMerchant does something similar. Yeah, racing drivers, I guess.
It's almost like some drivers wanted the caution to come out there, isn't it? Because that certainly looked avoidable. I'll agree with Evan's assessment of that. But anyway, the caution does come out. The entire field looks like they're coming down pit road. Some will stay there a little bit longer than others to get repairs made. But a quick splash and dash. No tyres really required there. They only ran a handful of green flag laps on this set. And so it should just be a fuel-only stop. And that looks like the 30 that wins the race off pit road.
And this is, as we mentioned, what the drivers who had stayed out to get the wave around wanted to get, because they're going to be able to get quick service. I'm admittedly pretty shocked that the drivers who had pitted on that most recent yellow come down again. Arjuna, you'd mentioned they were probably hoping for a ballpark of about 15 laps of a run. That would maybe be enough to coax everybody to come down to the pit lane, but clearly they feel like if they can stretch the fuel enough and kind of get their average closer to 44, which would be the number necessary now, you could cut a pit stop out of this and, you know, come down pit road just past lap number 100 or so, and maybe to stop it or so from this point on to the end of the race. So that might be the hope and a prayer, but it did bring everybody down pit road. So all those cars who got the wave around now have fuel, and everybody's back on an even keel.
One thing to note is I mentioned 8 tire set limits over the course of the race. Now, some teams and drivers will have a setup that wears the left sides more than the right sides, and usually you're more rear limited than front limited, if we're being honest. If you choose to take 2 tires, what apparently that does, according to some of the drivers that I've talked to, is it takes that side away from the limits, but you still can switch the other side without going down to 6. If you start with 8, you take left sides, then the next time you take right sides. You still have 7 sets left to use, which allows a little bit of flexibility heading towards the end. Short run at the front, of course, not unexpected, because I think a lot of these drivers who have been dominating so far, Andy, just want track position to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. They want to stay as close to the front as they can to try and stay out of the trouble. But we've seen trouble at the front, at the back, and everywhere in between already so far in this race. And we're only 63 laps in. The problem I always have with changing 2 tyres, especially here at Daytona, is that it changes the balance of the car. You're not really taking tyres here to make yourself quicker. You're very much limited by the draft and which lane you're in and who you're working with. It's just to try and get the car to handle a bit better so that you can make those moves. You're less likely to have that snap of oversteer coming off the corners. By changing 2 tyres, that changes the basic balance of the car, and it's something I'm always a little bit nervous to do. I'd rather take that extra time to have a perfectly balanced car and give away a bit of track position. But these drivers, a bit better than me, and I'm sure they can handle it.
I'll tell you what, a lot of them are going to finish slower than 6th, albeit in different splits, but don't knock yourself too much. Certainly different strategies. Drivers trying to trim out the race cars, get a car that's a little bit more comfortable for the long run, and in the end, I think both of the mentalities have won many of these over the years. But we'll see if this race can kind of find a groove again, right? It got shuffled around a little bit on that first yellow. The drivers really never found it on that short last run, and we'll try it again with the pack that looks much more similar to what it did some 63 laps ago when we started this race. 27 cars on the lead lap as the pace car heads down and in, and Colton Harvey comes through the restart zone to take the green flag. back. It is Joseph up top. The double one side. Chris Wilhite to the mix as well. But how about some big movers? Hogan and Harvey both started outside of the top 15 in this race. They become staples up front as the 8-car Dalton Collins going to lose a little bit of ground.
Yeah.
Sorry, in the case of Boyd Hogan as well, it was a car that we saw, like Andy had mentioned earlier, staying at the back means you stay out of the heart of the danger pack, but it means if there's trouble further back, you have less time to respond and get out of the way. Hogan has been at the front and very much been willing to try and run at the front and be amongst the very heart of the danger, and it's paid off for him so far.
Talk about big movers. Big mover going the wrong way. 13 though, Clayton Hoffman, he was leading that outside line on the restart, fell right outside the top 15. He got hung out to dry on the backstretch, and I think he might now be forced to ride it out at the back of this group. Again though, the push is really aggressive right from the word go. Drivers fighting for position and trying to work their way towards the front, or if you're already there, stay there.
And look at the move there. Is that the 30 car Harvey going to go bottom to top? He wants a push. Look out. He almost gets sent. Now Hogan comes up to throw a block. There are 134 laps to go in this race, and we're blocking like it's the white flag.
I think some drivers want this evening to be over sooner rather than later, as now it's going to be the opportunity for Harvey to finally slide back up into line on the outside groove. Dropped outside of the top 10 as a result. We've seen plenty of aggressors, and I think at this point Andy's list of ones to watch is probably longer than those he's not watching.
Well, the 5 has been added to the list, certainly, because that was a pretty aggressive move to trigger that 3-wide stuff a lap ago, but they are all being really, really feisty, and I think that's just a testament to the calibre of driver we're watching here. These are all drivers who know what they're doing. What to us perhaps looks a little bit too dicey for this early stage of the race, to them is just another race around the high banks of Daytona. They do this week in, week out, and they are certainly comfortable racing each other. 3 wide again, and this time it's the 5 that finds itself on the outside looking in.
And Hogan, it was real fortunate that I think the 8 machine had Dalton Collins, but it cut him a break there because the gap opened up, and I don't know if the 8 lifted to anticipate letting him in or if he lifted because he knew Hogan was going to come down no matter what, but the gap did open up on the outside. If that wasn't there, Hogan could have fallen all the way outside of the top 12, top 13. Instead, he stays in it, and look at the 18 car now with Justin Levine. He'll go to the inside. A Joseph squared to go for the race lead, but now the 11 car going to get just as good of a push from Garrett Maines. It is no holds bar racing at lap number 69 this time. Now Joseph back to the race lead in turn 2.
Yeah, apparently they want to make this a Royal Rumble, and one by one they'll drop like flies, but at least for the time being, working on lap 69, we're still holding on with 26 of the 36 left, fighting on the lead lap and in contention for a potential victory. Outside line with more momentum right now, and they're going to start sweeping their way down. Joseph cuts his way down low.
But Garrett Maines stays up high, working with the 5 of Boyd Hogan. I've seen those two working together quite a bit through the first third of this race. Those two clearly enjoying each other's company. Let's see if they can push their way to the front on the high side. One thing I'm really noticing here, Evan, is that if you're on that high line, you have got to guard the middle. Certainly heading into the final part of this race, we're seeing a few drivers now starting to gain confidence, and they will dive to the middle and make it 3 wide. I think towards the end, that will be one of the keys to the race. You've got to keep that that middle lane, which used to be the sucker hole, you've got to keep that closed, because clearly there's some speed to be found there.
And also one thing I noticed that you wouldn't see, to your point, a couple of years ago, is if somebody went into that sucker hole, typically nobody would dare bite, right? Everybody would go high or go low to avoid. People will see a car actively losing ground in the middle and see it as an opportunity. They'll leave the bottom, they'll leave the top to go to the middle and push and draft, and again, do anything they can to find an advantage. Garrett Maines and that top side absolutely fizzled out, so the 2 going to step down to the inside line. He'll find a spot in line 9th. Inside, check it up, though. And that's going to give a big run. Look at the 5 car, the speed difference here after the inside got misaligned.
And it shows that even Garrett Maines may be thinking that this is the chance to dive down low and link up with Harvey. All it's done now potentially is cost him a whole bunch of ground. If that outside can get gathered up once again, it seems to come in waves, and Right now it's ebbing, and I'm sure it's going to flow. And here's an opportunity for Harvey to slide his way up the track, and now he'll try and link up. Main slides up with him as well.
Yeah, that's where that momentum comes from. If two cars on the bottom get a run and they've got space to go high, that's what gives this outside line some real speed. And we've got three fast cars now pulling that outside lane. And let's see whether they can make any progress. 32 and 5. Those are three of, I think, the fastest cars in this race. And they've found each other now on the high side.
That could be a force to be reckoned with up on the outside of the racetrack. As it seems like the spacing has gotten much tighter from it was, I don't know, 30, 40 laps ago. Cars are actually side drafting and pinching a little bit, which is when that outside line won't run up against the wall. The white hash mark and the seam in the pavement's a good indicator. You can see right now they're kind of right on that seam, but certainly below the white hash marks in the corner. Early in this race, they were well up and above that. And you're going to see that outside get lower and lower and lower to try to pinch and take some air away from the cars underneath them as we get deeper into this race. But there is certainly an aggression level, and part of it is almost as if, what else are you going to do, Arjuna? If you want to be patient and you say, I'm just going to go to the bottom, I'm fine being fifth in line, I'll just ride here for an hour until it matters. That's not going to work because somebody else is going to be aggressive, take that spot away, you blink, you're in 35th. So it's almost like all it takes is one or two instigators to be aggressive, and then almost everybody else has to match that energy, or they're just going to get shuffled back. Now, it's not race ending to get shuffled back. I'd be totally fine if my name was Travis Cranberg or Alex Murray or Nick Vroman right now towards the rear of this lead pack, because I'm still well and in it. But it's almost like once one person makes a move, a second person does, and it's contagious. Listen, these are race car drivers. They're not just here to try to ride around and try to tick a stat off at the end of the night. Yeah, they want to win an iRacing Daytona 500, but they're here to race and they're here to have fun, and the aggression level is much higher than I thought it would be at this point in the race.
And remember that you have to be aggressive because there is an art to plate racing, and it's a very different skill to what you'll have at basically every other track on the NASCAR schedule. The way that you have to think about momentum and runs, it's why that certain drivers just have this knack for showing up and doing well. Look at Bubba Wallace in the last handful of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Some drivers really get on with this style of racing. Even if they don't really enjoy it, they seem to be good at it. And there are many drivers, including the legendary Dale Earnhardt, who said he didn't really like this style of racing, but for some reason had a habit of ending up in victory lane. But I really enjoy it. I think that this is the most fun that you can have in a racing car. It's stressful and your nerves are on edge by the end of the race, but it's an awful lot of fun when you're doing it, that's for sure.
And equally, I think, as entertaining from a spectator perspective as well. You know, you can go to the racetrack, you can watch on TV various forms of Cup Series racing, and, you know, despite the crashes and despite the risk inherent in doing this in the real world, it's entertaining, and it is some of the most fun stuff to watch, and I think that's why it translates to being some of the most fun stuff you can do here on the service, because it is relatively accessible for most people to get into, right? Not everyone's going to be able to go and check that extra 0.3 of a second off at an intermediate racetrack, but at a Daytona, you can do that. And I think that we're looking at the best of the best, but this is an accessible form of racing where you can jump onto the service right now. You can race later this week if you've got the license to do so in an iRacing Daytona 500. I promise you, the first thing that I did when I got my iRacing account, Cup Cars, Daytona, let's go. And if that's something that you would be interested in, of course, you can always find more information on how to start your iRacing career today by logging on to iRacing.com for more information. Lucky Lap 77, we're inching closer and closer, guys, to being halfway.
Yeah, and of course, all iRacing memberships, 40% off for new members, so it's a great way to jump in, even if you're not traditionally a fan of a certain type of motorsports. We've got a commentary booth for the Great American Virtual Race, with one American, yes, in the form of Evan Pasoko, one transplant to the US, and then one Brit who stayed up quite early because this is his favorite race in the world. So sim racing can bring us all together.
It certainly can, and iRacing, above any other online racing service out there, can let you sample a little bit of everything that the motorsport world has to offer. And this race in particular, to Evan's point, the fixed race that I took part in earlier on today, it's a fixed setup. You don't have to spend hours fine-tuning your car setup, trying to find that speed, and there were 25 splits, everything from a strength of field in split 1 of about 6 to 6,500 iRating, down to about 600 average iRating at the bottom. Whoever you are, however experienced you are, you can come and have a go at this highly addictive, highly entertaining form of racing.
And that's why the special event calendar really does have something for everybody, from the major oval events to the road courses to the endurance races and even some of the off-road and dirt action as well. And we'll be with you here on the iRacing Esports Network to cover those all through the 2023 calendar. 78 laps behind us. Just a quick damage report on what's gone on at the back of the field. 5 cars have gone to the garage. It is Piscata, Balacino, Perry, Atchison, and Pinheiro are out of this race. They have retired. Chris Pfeiffer is 31st position. He is on pit road but not actively driving, 16 laps down. Christopher Hill is 30th at 16 laps down. And then it's much tighter. There are 3 cars running 1 lap down in this race. Justin Lowry, Seth the Merchant, and Adam Blocker, 27th, 28th, and 29th, all a lap down. They are all fighting with each other in this lead pack. As you jump on board with the Merchant, if a yellow were to come out, the highest running of those 3 immediately gets waved back around to join the lead lap. And then, of course, the remaining 26 are still on the lead lap. So all things considered, nearly halfway through a 500-mile super speedway race, it's a hearty number of cars that are still competitive in this one.
Yeah, and the 24 you can see as we rode on board with the Merchant is on the lower line and in the same sort of bracket as the 35, tries to take it 3 wide down the middle, and now he's going to find himself having to back out of that one before more trouble ensues. Once again, maybe add another car to the list of aggressors so far. Outside line once again, just trying to get formed up and building its way on forward, getting to about halfway through the fuel window as well, so the tires have started to heat their way on up and drivers are having to deal with the loosening of the cars once again.
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken a lot about the side-to-side movement of these cars, but that onboard shot we just saw really showed the forward and backwards movement almost of the cars. It really looks as though they're just driving around, following in each other's wheel tracks. A nice little Thursday evening drive for these drivers, but it's anything but, really, because each car in each of those lanes is running at a slightly different speed. They're lifting at different points, sometimes having to hit the brakes, sometimes the side draft affects them, and that is the 30 car definitely feeling the side draft in the middle. Something really went wrong there for the number 30, and that will drop Colton Harvey right down the pack. So not quite sure what triggered that, but he found his way falling out of lane and falling now towards the back of the top 20.
He's eventually got to cut somebody off. The unfortunate soul there was Travis Kranborg, who had to get his nose chopped off, but Harvey is able to stop the bleeding down at 18th position. He had worked some 80 laps to make up all those spots. Gone in the blink of an eye. He has trickled all the way back down to where he started this race, back in the number 18 spot. Remember, we talked earlier about how many drivers did and did not take a time in qualifying. Harvey did, and that's where he found himself middle of the road. So his preference has clearly been, with that attempt to qualify, to run higher up, and it's going to be a long road to get back up front in this race. Joseph has led 14, soon to be 15 laps of this Daytona 500. Boyd Hogan has led more than anybody else so far tonight at 27. We'll continue to see as Joseph is pretty comfortable and seemingly on cruise control at the moment if he can challenge that number. Long way to go. The first bits of side-by-side back there in P6 as the 2 of Garrett Maynes leads the high line.
And now it's getting to the point as well where drivers have been up on the wheel for going on just over an hour or so. And for those that run more powerful equipment, the direct drive wheelbases and whatnot, and maybe starting to feel the effects of this race just a little bit physically as well. Gone are the days when drivers would compete on Logitech G27s and G29s for a lot of the World Championship caliber drivers with force feedback off. Now we are very much embracing all that modern equipment has to offer, and it can be a workout, that's for sure. Fortunately, one thing that for most drivers will not be a concern is brake pressure, but one thing that, Andy, sometimes a lot of drivers get at Daytona is the right foot jitters.
Absolutely, and a little bit of numbness sometimes in the foot as well. I found that with my pedals, quite a narrow, quite hard metal pedal, and Of course, your foot sort of overlaps the edge of it. You get numbness in the toes, you get an achy leg, your right arm often tends to really ache. That's something I found with these next-gen cars more than the old Gen 6s as well, because they have that tendency to get free on corner exit. You really have to tense those arms coming off the corner, be ready to catch that slide, and that's aside from the other hard work you do catching slides when you're being pushed or side drafted or trying to make those lane changes. So surprisingly physically demanding. We might not be dealing with the G-forces that the real world drivers would around the high banks of Daytona, but it is a work, and absolutely and certainly mentally draining if nothing else.
And I'm curious how much sweat and how many calories are going to be burned just based on how tense drivers has described that they need to drive these race cars. Now, we mentioned it's the second year of this next-gen era. They are certainly more comfortable in them than they had been in the 2022 version of this race, but that limit, right, with the different tire than what you saw on the previous generation of NASCAR Cup car on these, they can't slide as much. That limit is a little bit closer, so you got to be more prepared and more ready to react instantly, and that means you're tensed up. And listen, admittedly, again, you're not in a 120-degree stock car. You are not going 200 miles an hour. You're at home in your sim cockpit, but at the same time, if you are tensed and extremely both physically and mentally focused for an upwards of 3+ hours, you're going to feel it. Drivers are going to get sore. You're going to need to shake it out every once in a while, and I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, but we're getting deeper into this race, some, hour and 20-some-odd minutes since the drop of the green flag, so some of those are going to start to feel those effects as we get deeper and deeper, as lapped car getting swallowed up that time is Christopher Hill. He will fall a 17th lap down as he is off the pace with a little bit of damage, and maybe he can blend in with the pack here.
And of course, still tracking the battle to stay as the lucky dog recipient. It's DeMerchant in front of Lowry, in front of Blocker, with 3 cars still tracking as 1 lap down. DeMerchant in that Altus Esports car that has damage not just on the left rear quarter panel, but also on the front right front of the car as well. So that car definitely still needs to be beaten and worked on through the course of some of these subsequent pit stops, but he is definitely not shying away from getting physical and forcing his way on that outside line to try and make sure he's in front of that 24, 1 car behind on the low line down below.
And that's something important for the drivers to keep track of through the race too. If you do pick up some damage, which is highly likely in this form of racing, as long as you can hang in the pack, there's no obligation to repair all of that damage at once. As long as your car is capable of staying in the draft, you can repair it bit by bit by bit. Every time we get a caution, every time you have a pit stop, just get another 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds of that damage repair done, and you end up never really losing too much time. So your car might not be fully healthy until the end, but still healthy enough to run in the pack, stay in contention, and I've seen drivers come back to win these races, having been involved in an early wreck. It might take them half the race to get their car back into full working order, but a bit of perseverance can pay off.
And you can get away with a little bit of damage as well. When you look at it on paper, how much wind tunnel testing goes into a super speedway car in real life, this is a racetrack where aerodynamics are the most important. At the same time, though, given the draft and that massive hole in the air that's punched and the ability to bring cars up to speed as a group, you can actually get away, admittedly, with a little bit more aerodynamic damage on the cars here than you can at, say, an intermediate or a 1-mile racetrack. So you don't have to get back to perfect, right? You damage a race car, you're never going to get back to the way it was when it rolled off with a virtual hauler, but you can get close, and in many cases, close is close enough. All you got to do is be in the lead pack on the white flag. That's the objective for everybody. If you could be on the lead lap on the last lap of this race, who knows what can happen.
I guess it's a slightly different story as well as compared to the real world, where they don't have maybe as much adjustments between qualifying and race trim. So you're in the real world today, you've been watching the cars out in qualifying really bouncing, just as stiff as possible, trying to suck the cars to the ground. Not what you definitely want in a race situation. These drivers can have very different qualifying to race trim cars, and so these cars will be a lot more pliable, and then even as they get some damage and maybe drive a little bit worse, it won't be as bad as it could be.
Yeah, drivability for me always far more important in these kind of races, but there will be drivers who perhaps focus on trimming their cars out a little bit more for outright speed, and they're the drivers that everyone wants to work with because their cars are just generating a bit more speed. They're able to pull those runs to the front. Although some of the cars that I thought perhaps had gone down that route, not really making any progress now. The 2 and the 5, they've been locked together at the front of that high line for a number of laps, never really getting any further forward than 4th or 5th. So it really does seem now, Evan, as we head towards the halfway point, perhaps drivers just content to ride in their lanes and log some laps.
They got feisty at quarter distance, but for the moment, things in order. 2 rows deep at Daytona. We are closing in on halfway in this iRacing Daytona 500. We'll step aside for a moment. Still a long way to go. From Daytona Beach, Florida, Joseph leads with 91 laps complete.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
And we are back live from iRacing's virtual Daytona International Speedway, 3 laps shy right now from halfway home in this 2023 iRacing Daytona 500. Joseph continuing to lead as we close in on a second cycle of green flag pit stops. Myself, Evan Pasoko, alongside our Juna Kankipati, Andy McEwen with you. We encourage you to join us with live timing and scoring at RaceSpot.tv/timing. Guys, 2 yellows in the opening half of this race, the first of which kind of cycled up our pit strategy a little bit, but the second yellow brought everybody else back into order, and we are within 5 to 10 laps of another trip down to the pit road. We saw how much that first pit cycle spread everybody out. Let's see what it'll do if we get there to this lead pack of 21 cars.
A race that's been rolling on at a canter, almost at the halfway mark, and with about an hour and 20 minutes still left to go. That pit stop cycle last time by really did break it up, and it wasn't until the caution cycled its way on through that we backed up the entirety of the pack. Although, having said that, we knew it was coming. The gap behind had already been closing. It was building up to be another tense race, and 36 starters left with 28 still out there and running.
Yeah, and as we race towards this halfway point and the next round of pit stops, it looked during our commercial break like things were just settling down, everyone sort of getting single file around the bottom, but I think some of these drivers saw what happened the last time we had green flag pit stops and how easy it is to lose touch with the lead pack. They're not content to pit from 10th, 15th, 20th place. They want to race to the front before they head back to pit road.
We also have that dynamic that was a little bit amplified last time, which was lapped cars on the bottom line trying to, not necessarily intentionally, but in the way of your race leaders who are on the outside line of the racetrack, getting down to the inside. It's all lead lap cars right now for the most part up in here. We still have that group of 3 and now 4 that are trying to hang on. You got Lowry, DeMerchant, and Blocker, who are a lap down. Blocker's not in this lead group, but is going to be a point where these drivers need to get down to the inside. They have to get single file if they're going to get to pit road. Also, we saw a significant amount of incidents, I would say, on that initial pit cycle. A couple of cars ended up in the wall. A couple of cars missed the pit entry, ended up with penalties. You need to make sure that you're getting ready, you know your plan, you know where your pit stall is, and you know who you're going to be pitting with, guys, as we are officially past halfway home.
Especially important now because you're running out of opportunities to make up ground that you lose in the cycle of pit stops. So I'll call the first cycle of pit stops messy, but partially just because we had so many cars descend to pit entry at the same amount of time. Yes, it's a wide pit entry. You can only fit so many cars on the brakes, and here we go. We're going to start to see them filter their way on down. Most of the cars coming in from the low line, but here we go, Andy. Pit stops underway.
And a much smaller group this time, so they learnt their lesson from last time. We've got, just over half a dozen cars pitting at the same time, including a couple of our front runners. The 11 car bringing them down then. Joseph will be looking to try and hold on to his track position advantage. Tommy Gossett in as well. You can see Garrett Maines in the number 2 in. The 23 sat on pit road, still getting repairs done after its accident earlier on. 4 tyres, full tank of fuel. That takes about the same amount of time to do. So if it's a full tank of fuel you need, then 4 fresh tyres should go on the car. And I think that will once again be the 11 that leads this pack back out onto the racetrack.
It was an okay pit stop for that group. You can see those lead 2, the 11 and the 20, a little bit ahead of Maines, Torres, and co. And now here's the second group in. A lot of smoke, but it's mostly just smoke. Some contact behind as wrestling his way into the pit stall there. Looked like that was the 25 of Rocky Boyd. Found himself on the outside of pit road trying to get in. That's why I mentioned you got to know where your stall is, because if you've got an early pit box, you can't be swinging out wide like that. So he loses a little bit of time getting over to the pit lane like that, but he will eventually make his way to the box, and that leaves these 5 as the race leaders who have yet to come down pit road, and would expect them to be in this lap, if not in quick order, as they try to not lose a gap to anybody else. Let's see. Hogan leads the group. He'll look low, and all 5 are headed to pit road.
Meanwhile, merging their way back out onto track and back up to speed, Parker White at the very front with Jonathan Oshalim as they find themselves now winding back up to speed and in fact taking over the lead of the race once more, because it seems as though they were able to leapfrog the smaller group that came out and they struggled to build up their momentum.
Here comes that second group, though. They have got a bit of a run further back. The 11 car leading it there. Garrett Maines being given a push by the 21 of Torres, but look at the extra speed. Takes nearly a full lap to get these cars up to full speed here at Daytona, and I think by the time that this second group has done so, the 11 may have got, maybe not right to the front, but at least back towards the top 5.
And now you see the split battle, bottom of your screen, the cars who have just come off of pit road. The cars passing them on the racetrack, they're not for position. Those were lapped cars, but you're trying to see where all of this will blend out as these two packs are going to beat each other off at turn number 2. And Boyd Hogan and company not going to be quick enough, I don't believe. On the outside and flying by at a 15-mile-an-hour advantage is the group led by Jonathan Osalem as he will go to the lead for the first time in this race.
And now it's all about, for those cars, still building up the momentum, not losing track of the draft and just now riding. They have a one-lap advantage in terms of strategy, and that will mean a lap later in the subsequent cycle of pit stops that might just keep them out of trouble if we see more takers to pit entry and more drama next time by, but opportunities to play something out as we wind to the end of the race.
Not quite as much separation in the pack this time. We've got 15 of them covered by just over 2 seconds, so all sort of within the lead draft. I'm sure that they will get themselves properly back together. So we've thinned the field slightly here and definitely shuffled the order. The 2-car here, you ride on board with Garrett Maines. He finds himself just about hanging on to the tail of this group. He's got the 28-car of Pacholi right ahead. And these two content to sit in line for now as they try to close those little gaps and close back in on the lead group. But a much cleaner round of pit stops, I'd say, that time, Evan. They're definitely learning as they go.
And they figured it out that time through, and now you're going to see the aggressive bump draft seated by Maines and the company. They're going to try to make up the 1.8-second deficit, very similar to what we saw after that first cycle of pit stops. The field gets fractured into a couple of different groups, but I think this will resume being one large group quicker than it did previous. The losers in that pit cycle are Ruckman, Vroman, Kraneborg, Wilhite, and Newman. Those drivers 16th through 20th position that were part of the lead pack. They are some 7 and 14 seconds back respectively. So we do lose a few, but overall a much cleaner pit cycle for everybody. And this fuel number continues to perplex us a little bit, I think, on the strategy here, Junior, right? At the start I mentioned 40 was the number. If you can get to 40 as there's a spinner in the back corner of the outside wall.
I think, yeah, Maines hard into the outside wall. He was getting a big shove from behind and leapfrogged his way almost into the top 10. And for one of the 2 NASCAR drivers in the field, that is likely going to be race done.
Yeah, I don't know, might just get away with it. These new next-gen cars, remember, they are a little bit stronger than the car they replaced, and might just get away with it. Certainly losing the draft and will be off the pace, but perhaps not race-ending. He'll be hoping for a quick caution. He nearly was the cause of that quick caution. I'm sure we'll get a replay and see exactly what happened, but you're right, he was being pushed by somebody, and I don't think, Evan, that it was a car I've seen him working with much so far in this race, and that so often is the case. You find yourself suddenly working with someone new, you just take a few laps to get into that rhythm with each other, and it's those first couple of laps where sometimes things can go wrong.
And you'll notice what we're not seeing is cars getting hooked into the outside wall on the backstretch. It was right coming off of the tri-oval, right? They were on the short chute by then, but it's that pushing in the tri-oval. Watch, as they come through the banking, he's going to try to line it up, and he gets there before they get straightened out, just a little bit too early. Maines hadn't been able to point and shoot that car off to turn 1 yet. He was still exiting the corner, and he got onto him a little bit too quick, and that's what happens when you try to push it a little bit too far.
It's also important to try and hit a little bit more square to the center of the bumper. He was offset to the right and so had a bit of an angle, loading on the banking as well, of course. And it just shows the treachery with which you must play the bump drafting game, and it's something that's been common here at Daytona, not just, of course, with these NASCAR machineries, but to those that have been watching across of the start of 2023 and the iRacing special events. We've seen plenty of bump drafting, Andy, when it comes to GT3 machinery as well.
And it's very difficult to do right, that is for sure, and that's exactly what we saw there. Torres, I think, perhaps expected Maines to go up against the wall and Garrett didn't, and that's what led to that slightly off-centre pushing. Bit of a shake-up here in the middle of the pack. Predictably, once they all got back together, there are a couple of drivers not content to ride around, and even more predictably, it's that red number 5 car that's making the moves as Hogan tries to work his way back to the front.
And here's a jump on board with the second car in line upside in that 5 of Hogan. And before Garrett Maines trying to knock the safer barrier down, so rudely interrupted the pit strategy talk, guys. Everybody came down pit road 8 laps ago. That was with 98 laps to go in this race. If they want to one stop to the end, they're going to have to get 44 laps out of this fuel run. As you can see, Hogan aggressively pushing that 6 car in line and trying to keep things moving, as now the 6 machine going to jump right back up to the outside and they're going to challenge for the lead. I just don't know if they can do 44. On both green flag runs we've seen tonight, no one's got past 41, maybe 42, and it goes back to that discussion I overheard on the radio where they were talking with some of the cars leading the pack, and they were talking about even being 1 to 2 laps short of hitting the 40 number. So if they're going to get to 44, we're going to need to see a pretty evident change in how aggressive they're racing, and it doesn't appear that's happening right now. But man, would that be tight to be single digit short of being able to make it to the end of the race on that preferred strategy.
Yeah, and these are the situations where you've got to be very careful about being placed at the front of the queue. Whether you're inside or up high, you need to make sure that you're working with someone behind who may help you out slightly later. On the outside, Hogan giving a big old shove, and now he's going to cut down low and take the race lead, but working with some lap traffic, and this is where also you've got to use the traffic to your advantage.
Yeah, and that lap car really did cut Hogan a break there, I think, as well, to get down to the bottom of the track. No, that's the 29, wasn't it? Cut him a break because Hogan wasn't really clear, but this early in the race, still relatively early in the grand scheme of things, perhaps a little bit of give and take at this point. Eric Royce is the man who leads the pack, doesn't lead the race, as we've said. The 6 car a lap down, although potentially now just hanging on to the back of the lead lap with that push to the front from Hogan, and they do now settle back in single file. To the point on fuel mileage, though, I think really the only way they're going to get anywhere near 40 laps is if they do settle down single file and really back the pace up. If there is a collective agreement across the pack that that's what you need to do, then the leader can actually start lifting off, start slowing the pace down, as long as they're under the understanding that no one's going to come up and challenge them. I don't really think they're going to be making those sort of decisions here. I think it's every driver for themselves, and if the leader starts to lift off, then those behind will try and take advantage.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there are going to be acquaintances, friends, maybe even a teammate or two amongst the field in this race, but this is not the kind of event where you see the master plan of 5 cars commit to it, run away from the field, and commit to get a good team win. Everybody wants to win the iRacing Daytona 500, and the 25 machine of Rocky Boyd quite frustrated as the 10th placed car in line, guys. He's the first car in kind of that second half of this lead pack. He's frustrated that he's not getting enough of a push as he would like from River Hayes. Now, Hayes is the car directly behind him, but is not a lead lap car, so may not be so inclined to be as aggressive as Hogan would want, but just worth noting that, all these drivers clearly want to be aggressive, and Rocky Boyd wants more as he will slice to the outside. Actually, it's the 10 who goes to the outside because they almost drove right into the back of each other as they caught up to that lead pack.
To your point about, everyone wants to win an iRacing Daytona 500, there's something about Daytona where no matter what race it is, a Daytona 500, a rallycross race, a regular 45-minute iRacing IMSA race, it makes you just want to push that little bit more, to really extract the most that you can from the car. And it's one of those special tracks that just wheels you on a little bit more, and it really is a special facility. And as you can see, sun's starting to set as well. Don't think we have too much danger of running down into the nights itself, but track conditions going to shift, just albeit slightly. Drivers will have to stay on top of that, and for those sometimes racing in virtual reality, Andy, they have to worry about the sun potentially coming through the cloud cover and going right into their eyes.
Yeah, that cloud cover sort of protecting them from that for the time being, but that could well change as we go deeper into the race. It's always one of my favourite parts of this race, actually, as the sun starts to set, they race into that sunset and potentially into darkness as well. A really, really great vibe that creates around the Daytona International Speedway. An interesting point that you raised there, though, Arjuna, about that sort of temptation to just do things in this race that you wouldn't normally do even at another super speedway race. There's something about this style of racing that can sometimes bring out the worst in a driver anyway, because you feel like Superman in the draft. You feel like you can take on anyone. You back up, you get that push, you get the draft, and you can slingshot past everybody. But sometimes just because you can do that doesn't mean it's necessarily the thing to do. At this stage of the race, definitely a bit of patience being shown, but you get down to the end of the race and all of a sudden you remember this is the Daytona 500. This is one of the biggest oval races of the year, and if you have half a chance at fighting for the win, you will do things today that you wouldn't normally do to try and get it done.
I'm just thinking it seems quiet, almost too quiet for the
Don't
cast
say
of
that.
characters. Listen, I have lost faith after that quarter, race fiasco. I just don't know if they're going to sit this way for this whole run. Should they? Yes. When was the last time race car drivers did something that they should do, right? We talk about how it's a long race. You got to save the race car. You got to be smart. It's an endurance race by oval standards. And yet, they were throwing 3 lane change blocks for the race lead with 130 plus laps to go. Who's going to be the instigator in this? Because admittedly, again, I could be at the very end of this pack in 13th position and be extremely comfortable with where I'm running. You tell me I'm single file, 13th, past halfway, and I'm the last car in the lead lap, I'm with it. I think that is a great place to be in. I just feel like there's going to be an agitator somewhere. Do they ride this out for the next 25 laps to the next cycle of pit service? Probably should. Will they? I find it hard to believe it. Maybe they're going to prove me wrong in this, but again, things have just settled way down. Joseph dominated through the middle portion of this race. He had taken over the most laps led moniker with 33 laps led. Now Boyd Hogan, who dominated a lot early in this race, has been able to rattle off a lot consecutively. He has retaken that honor, now leading 37 laps of the 119 that have been completed so far. So that honor goes back to him, and it just seems like they've settled down. This is what I was expecting to see earlier, before the halfway point, but it is that point where I mentioned you get to 120, 130, that mental, that physical fatigue starts to settle in a little bit, and maybe these drivers just need to give their brains a little bit of an opportunity to take a break, because it's going to come fast and heavy late in this race when you get down to the battle for the race win, and maybe these drivers are recharging, so to say.
I think it's also a lot of fuel saving going on right now. We're in the situation where I think basically, according to a NASCAR crew chief that's watching on and sending me some tidbits, he doesn't think there's any chance anyone's going to do enough saving to cut out a stop. So instead what we're talking about is cutting out as much time as you can spend in pit lane. And what does that mean as well, Andy? It will mean the potential for no tire stops from here to the end of the race.
Yeah, for sure. If you're not taking on a full tank of fuel perhaps at any point, then it might be worth, or maybe taking 2 tyres at some point if you feel that is a move that you're willing to make. But yeah, that I think is definitely on the drivers' minds. They're thinking strategy, they're thinking long game. This might change things though. Lapped cars throwing aggressive blocks on the leaders, and this is definitely going to split this pack. This, I think, could bring about a return to the 2x2 racing, because we've got lap cars on the inside, lap cars on the outside, and some of them getting really defensive to try and hold on to the lead lap.
And that's what makes this pack bigger than that 11 or 13 that I referenced earlier. And look out, 3 wide. The 8 car going to go up the middle. And it was just looking too good for too long. It's getting messy. Up towards the front of the field. Hogan, White, they're going to stick with each other. They'll use the outside as their weapon of choice. On the bottom, the 36 car leads down there. But again, we talk about the non-lead lap cars. That's Alex Murray. He is the last car on the lead lap, or was the last time by the start-finish line. And look at the move to the inside by the 5 car. Hogan sidesteps and makes a move to get away from the 6 of Eric Royce. So he'll shake a lapped car off to work with another lapped car as we take a second look at how all that unfolded.
Yeah, look at the wiggle, woggle from Parker White there. And Joseph just backs out of that one and says, you know what, fair play to you. You hold on, I'm going to slide my way on back and change my underwear before I go once again.
I have no idea how Parker saved that. That was a wreck for most of the drivers. I think only the number one driver in this race could manage to hold on to that. Hogan with another big block to the outside, and this I think is what could spell disaster. These big blocks, it just checks up the whole lane. If you do get clear, that is, of course, it's easy to throw that block when you're not clear, and that instantly causes trouble. But the blocks are getting bigger. Drivers know the deeper into the day we get, the more important it is to hold on to that track position, and we're starting to see what they're willing to do to achieve that.
And you're right, it's not even the initial block all the time. Sometimes that'll get you. You'll go to block a lane, you're going to be too late, and you'll take yourself out over the nose of somebody else. But it really is that checkup effect that will hit the car fourth or fifth in line. And we'll see those checkups be a big factor. In fact, we've seen them already tonight spit some cars out of line seemingly indiscriminately. There won't even be a very obvious block at the front of the field that'll send that accordion effect down the line. It's just somebody gets a little bit loose or has to lift or changes lanes, and the further down the line you go, the later and the more lag that you get in that reaction time, eventually it's too much for somebody, and somebody's either going to drive into the back of the car in front of them, or they're going to have to dive at a line, and you're either turning into the car to the left or you're turning into the outside wall on the right-hand side of the racetrack. So those checkups can bite out of nowhere. And just a note, look back there, lurking is that secondary pack. That is Ruckman, Vroman, Kranberg, and Torres. 5 seconds off of the race leader. It is an itty-bitty pack back there, guys. For the last few laps, they have been faster than this lead pack. Now that this lead pack has gotten mixed up in two and soon to be 3 wide racing, as they'll have to squeeze to the inside, trying to work around the number 31 car. That's Tyler Justice going another lap down. So this raciness up front may give an opportunity to that second pack of race cars to catch up pretty quickly.
And I think at this point of the race as well, Andy McEwen has his list of the naughty drivers out so far, but in the cockpit you are also forming that list. And I think with some of the blocks that we're seeing from the likes of Hogan, for example, he is definitely being earmarked on the list of some drivers as one to watch heading into those closing stages, as being one of the aggressors, as Andy's been calling them.
Yeah, Boyd Hogan's got a fast race car, and really that should be making people want to work with him. But what he's doing with that race car is having the opposite effect, really. These blocks, these lane changes, these aggressive moves, you're absolutely right. The other drivers will remember that, and they're going to be less likely to cut him a break in the closing stages of the race. Really, this is a 180 or 90 lap audition for that final sprint to the flag. You're trying to impress your fellow racers, you're trying to make friends, you're trying to form partnerships that you can use at the end to try and get yourself into victory lane. And sometimes it's not always the best thing to show your hand too early, because that can often rub the other drivers up the wrong way and give away potentially your race-winning move.
And here's a move from the outside to the inside, is trying to work both lanes as best as possible, at least. Is Eric Royce in the 6 car. He'll get cut off by the 18. It's Justin Levine, who takes quite a shot. So give credit to the 6. It may not be appreciated by the rest of the drivers, but for being a lapped car, doing what he needs to do, being an aggressor, and staying in the conversation for the lucky dog and or the wave around, as he stays right there with these leaders. I know we referenced earlier the first accident of the race, that maybe the lapped car involved in that one was not yielding enough to the leaders, and if the 6 oversteps it and causes an accident, that's certainly the case. But he's doing a good job of mixing it in as they're going to fan out off of turn number 4. Slow roll there, middle of the road, as it was the teal car who lost a lot of speed. I think that might have been River Hayes. Now it looks like maybe the 30 machine, Colton Harvey, who drops back. He was the one who tried to cut down, couldn't do it. And again, a block takes out nearly a bunch of race cars.
And remember, we're still early doors relative in this race. You only get into the money business of the Daytona 500 into the final 10 or so laps, and there was a bit of a clip there. Unfortunately, not much that Tommy Gossett could do. And a good reaction through the field to recognize the situation, to back it on up. Remember, Adam Blocker is 2 laps down in that blue number 15. He slides down below the yellow lines trying to mitigate the situation, and we survive a little fracas.
And more great car control there. Sure, Colton put himself in that position, but at least he had the quick hands to get himself out of it without gathering half the field up. But really what caused that was a bit of hesitation. He wanted to go down low, wasn't sure if he was clear, and in that moment of hesitation, the inside line got the run on him, and then he really wasn't clear. And actually, if he'd have just committed in the first place, that might well have worked out a bit better. More shuffling at the front, the 6 car pulling to the outside, and he will bring Parker White with him. So another lead change, the 1 car now back to the point.
Parker White gets his first crack at being back at the front of the field properly. Last time by, 3rd at the start-finish line. This time as he pushes Eric Royce, will he get his 2nd lap lead of the afternoon? Yes, he will. So Parker White back to the race lead after he started this race in 3rd, but was not a major player in much of it. But later in the race, maybe it's time to go. But I'm with you, Arjun. I don't even think we're near go time yet. You've still got basically the entire eNASCAR race distance to go, as next time by, there's going to be 70 laps left in this race. And Jonathan O'Shalem saying the same thing. He's saying, you guys realize the top 10 we've broken away. Like, what are we pushing here for? I mean, some drivers get it, but other drivers are clearly thinking differently than others, as we've seen this lead pack splinter into 2. I don't expect that to last long, but clearly the opinions on the best move next is varying depending on who you ask on the grid.
I mean, at the end of the day, just surviving these races and finishing on the lead lap is an accomplishment in and of itself, and I mean that sincerely. I've tried many a time, and outside of my own attempts to sabotage myself, including when these cars used to be the old 4 speed shifters, when you could go from 3rd to 2nd instead of from 3rd to 4th, like a moron, and blow your engine up before you even got to the green flag. But they're just so treacherous. There's so much unknown that you've got, and so much hard running left. I compare this to the Coke 600, Andy, and I think the Coke 600 is maybe a more technically difficult race to try and succeed because you're trying to do a lot more. If you ask me which race is more stressful, in my opinion, it's always Daytona.
Yeah, 100%, because so much of your fate lies outside of your hands. You're sort of reliant on everybody else behaving themselves and everyone else sticking to your script. The trouble is that everyone's got a different idea of what that script should be. I mean, look, we've already got that 2nd pack having closed back in. They're not going to be content to ride at the back, although I'm sure some of them would quite like to. Here's the thing. The sensible thing to do in this race is to, as soon as the green flag waves, pull down to the inside, single file, and just log some laps for a couple of hours. There's no point racing until you get to the end of the race. But they're racing drivers, and they're racing drivers for a reason, and they want to put on a show, which is exactly what they're doing. The 11 car of Joseph to the front, but he had his hands full then, as Hogan was all over his rear bumper.
67 laps to go in this race, likely about 10 laps or so away from an additional trip down to the pit lane, which would be the hopeful drivers had thought that it was going to be the final stop of the night. But again, the fuel numbers just not adding up. So likely 2 trips to pit road still stand between us and the home stretch. Joseph to the bottom, looking to the outside there was the 3rd car in line, Seth the Merchant, who's a lap down, just trying to stay in this battle. And now here comes the 5 again. It's the same cars all the time. The 5 is always there. Boyd Hogan's aggressive. No surprise to see him there. Joseph has been up there. So those 2 drivers have, maybe dispelled that alternative strategy of, the way to do good in this iRacing Daytona 500 is to linger back, to not be the focus. I mean, they've been up front all night long, but listen, a lot can happen in the final 66 laps, and again, it's just starting to look like it did before halfway. They're making me nervous. Can we get to those green flag pit stops in 10 laps? This is the kind of racing you're going to get when you have a 17-plus car lead pack, and if they can get to a pit cycle, they'll space out a little bit, and that would increase the odds of this race getting to the end under one green flag run.
They were pushing, by the way, through turns 3 and 4 all the way, and it was Chris James in the Abruzzi 26 car getting a big old shove from behind. He's going to allow the leaders to cycle their way on through. Important because James is involved in that fight for the lucky dog position with DeMerchant in the Altus Esports car now directly behind him. Royce, Murray, Langford, Hayes, Lowry as well. There's plenty of cars trying to leave themselves in a position for an inevitable caution to be able to cycle back to the lead lap.
Yeah, that's the thing though. They don't want to be the cause of the caution, and the longer they linger towards the front of this pack, I think the higher the probability of that happening, because it is getting very dicey out there. Indeed, the onboard cameras really showcase this perfectly, just how busy it is. Cars directly in front, cars directly behind, cars to your left, sometimes cars to your right as well. You're pushing, you're being pushed, the side draft is moving your car all over the racetrack. This is so hard to do, a real dance on a knife edge at 200 miles an hour. It's fun to watch, but at any moment we could be seconds from disaster.
It just stresses me out, even watching it, not even racing it at every single time. And you can see this pack is closing in on a lapped car real quick. Tyler Justice going to lose another lap. He will hold high. Can they sneak on through? Topside, I suppose, is the place you want a slow car to be if you have to catch them in the corner, and everybody's going to be able to accordion on through without incident. But that was not a good exchange for the 26. Looked like Hogan just kind of left him there, and now dropping is Chris James. That's an immediate drop of 10 miles an hour when he lost the draft there that quickly.
And now well and truly at the very back of the train to stay in the Lucky Dog fight, so he's got some work to do. Still 3 wide though, about 4 cars back in this leading pack as they work down the back straightaway. Onto lap 33, lap 34, and lap 35 through the field of cars as they get ready for a potential another cycle of green flag pit stops. And to Andy's point that he's made on a handful of occasions today, it's to that time when you start wondering, how do I get down low because my fuel tank's starting to run empty?
Well, there's just no way of getting there, is there? The only way is to jump to that third lane and lift right off, drop to the back. And at this point in the race, you can't afford to do that. You've got what you've got now. You've just got to hope that a hole opens up down low. That is starting to happen. You can see this sense of urgency now to get down to the bottom of the racetrack. That tells us we're not that far away from pit stops. They've done getting on for about 40 laps, so it could be any moment now that we see them starting to come down for a second consecutive round of green flag pit stops. Just as I say that though, Evan, a couple of cars diving to the high side as well.
It's almost like they got the broadcast pulled up and they do some of it out of spite, right? Yeah, now's the time to go to the inside. Sure, outside it is. Let's add a third lane. Why not? At least this lead group of 6 have been able to pull away, and I was going to say, much like you, now's a good time to stay to the bottom, but I don't think Boyd Hogan has much interest in taking this the easy route. If somebody gets alongside him, I am willing to put lots of money on the fact that he will challenge them, as we see Rocky Boyd coming up alongside. However, Chris Wilhite, here remains. A couple of drivers are talking about pitting now. There are 61 laps left to go in this race. Again, it doesn't really matter when you pit because you're going to need an additional stop to make it to the end of this race. And here comes that trio in the battle for 18th position onto pit road. A little bit tight, but they're all in. It's Newman, Maines, and Wilhite down for service. They've really got nothing to lose because they had lost touch with the lead pack. Now, what does the lead pack of cars do as they head to the tri-oval? No takers.
And that's the thing that you can do here in the virtual world, right? Is queue up on the radio and talk to the drivers that you're racing next to. If we were racing out in the real world, how would that work? Well, you'd have drivers talking to their spotters communicating up on the spotter stand and trying to link up and coordinate the teams. As that's Ruckman that's going to come down.
No.
DeMerchant slides his way on through, but it all happens below the yellow line. We stay green at Daytona.
how, again, did they avoid a multi-car wreck there with cars sliding to the left, sliding to the right. They're nearly four wide for the race lead now through turns 3 and 4. And who would be in the middle of it but the number 5 car of Boyd Hogan, never far away from the action. And he finds himself in the middle, 3 wide for the lead. There's no gap down low. That was almost a block too far. This is getting very, very dicey indeed now. Pit stops looming, and for some drivers, they can't come soon enough.
They are just begging for that magic number to hit as Christopher Hill will come down pit road. He was the other driver that was involved in that near accident on the inside line. Merchant going to come down pit road. There's the second look as they both thought this was still the 24 hours of Daytona, guys. A couple of weeks late for that one as you can see the discombobulation up front that sends them both down and through the grass. Again, it all happened below the double yellow line, so no need for a yellow flag, and this race stays green. Those two drivers, notably, were both lapped cars that were not fighting with the race leaders for position. They were both in that pack trying to maintain a chance at a lucky dog or even to just stay on the lead lap itself. And what a block to the outside as a huge swing up top. That time, the aggressive move was by Eric Royce. And again, I get it, as a lapped car, you want to be competitive, but you're 18th, and you're throwing a Hail Mary block on the leader with 58 laps to go.
I think the logic has gone out the window as there's our race leader, Pacelli, being spun off into the grass, and now he's going to be shooting through and fortunately able to slow it down in time without having to risk sliding back up the banking and making it even worse. But no logic, no sense, and we still have more than 50 laps to go.
Excellent idea, those 4 drivers that have just bailed for the pit lane. That is the safest place to be right now. There's every chance that when they rejoin the track, they'll do so under yellow flag conditions, because this is starting to get silly now. So many big blocks, as you were saying, from cars that aren't even on the lead lap, or they're trying to hang on to the lead lap, and it's just asking for trouble. The 28 car there, well, hard to tell from that angle whether they moved down or the 8 car moved up, but either way, the 8 car moved through into the lead, and once again, we avoid disaster.
And again, another near big one. We have had our share of cars getting spit out of line. We've had our share of accidents tonight, as here's the onboard perspective, and the 8 car getting pushed so aggressively there may be a late move, but we have yet to have one single big one. Here is a big group of cars, though, to pit road, 4 wide at the commitment line on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Could have been a lot worse, though. Mostly they made it in without incident as your leaders pit at lap 144.
Yeah, only 2 cars staying out, Powell and Montgomery. It sees the rest of the field on in. And a couple of looks at that replay. Was that Boyd Hogan making less friends with the rest of the field? I think it was.
No.
I know, hard to believe that, isn't it? I tell you, I've had so much fun watching Boyd in this race, because if you want action, just look for that red number 5 car. He's always there, and he's going to lead this pack off pit road as well. So, hey, he's being aggressive. He's perhaps fallen off a few drivers' Christmas card lists, but it's working for him. He's out in front, and as long as this group settle down, I think they should wind out as the leading pack, because really only 2 cars chose to stay out that time. The 27 and the 16, Sean Powell and Dustin Montgomery, they're now heading to pit road, but those 2 cars probably will find themselves falling further back in this group once they all get back up to speed. Doesn't look like there's much separation again this time, so hey, we could be straight back to that 3 wide racing before you know it.
I kept thinking that maybe it was going to end up like that first stint where there were very clearly defined winners and losers, but hasn't been the case in either of the green flag cycles since then. And Boyd Hogan, the net race leader, but for how long? Because here comes a huge run on the outside line of the racetrack. The Torres machine leads that charge. And now we'll see as the Powell and Montgomery machines cycle off of pit road. Not a fighting chance for them to be able to blend up to speed. And it will indeed be Boyd Hogan back to the lead. Again, you might not think that the ultra-aggressive approach is the race-winning one, but Boyd Hogan has led more laps than anybody else so far in this iRacing Daytona 500, and it's not even close.
It's all now about one more cycle of pit stops, right? And making sure you execute there. You stay out of trouble with penalties and any potential drama with 3-4 wide entries as well. It's all now about just hoping and praying you put yourself in the right position at the right time, running your way to the line and to the checkered flag.
Not sure what's going on here. They've actually settled down single file, but I don't think it will matter. That second pack have got a whiff of the draft now, and I think they'll be right back with them and will arrive with momentum. And Arjuna's absolutely right. We're into the final stages of this race now. Just over 50 laps to go. And, well, I was about to say this is where the intensity level starts to pick up. It's hard to imagine it could get much higher, but certainly drivers will now really have a sense of urgency to get to the front and get there fast.
Just taking a half listen in to some of the discussions over the radio now as drivers try to figure out what's next. We have found ourselves again with a massive snake. It includes the leading 13 cars in this race with 54 laps to go from Daytona. This is now the most strategy-wise that we have seen so far tonight. Right up until now, it's been pretty clearly defined. You're going to go about 40 to 41 laps. You're going to come down to the pit lane. You can do that, and that may be the most popular decision. Run your 40, come down to the pit road with the least amount of laps left so that you can spend the least amount of time in pit road to just take a splash and go. Now, we saw alternate strategies for the likes of Pacholi and Newman, Maines, Wilhite, and Kranberg, some of the other drivers who have lost touch with these leaders and maybe have a little bit less to gamble on. You could pit anywhere after lap 160 and get to the end of the race. The concern with that, or even waiting till the very end to just take a splash, Arjuna, is if we get a yellow and this race goes to overtime and you don't give yourself a little bit of insurance gas, you could have a real big issue. So all of those decisions are what loom ahead of these drivers. The good news is they've got about 35 laps until they have to make that choice, but it's time to start strategizing. If you've got a crew chief on the box, if you've got a strategist, heck, even if your spotter's pretty smart, ask him too. Now's the time to formulate a plan. What is going to be your race-winning call?
Well, I'll tell you what I would be thinking right now. You're going to come in probably, what, a lap 185 or so, somewhere in that threshold. About 15 laps of fuel to get to the end. A 40-lap window. What do we know? Well, we know that the way that NASCAR fills their cars, it's not via a pump like it is in endurance racing. It's instead by gas cans, and a gas can here is about half a tank of fuel. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel confident putting just 20 laps of green flag running into your car? If you get one green-white checkered, you may be okay, but if it starts to stack up, you have to wonder, is the gamble to stick just that one can of fuel going to bite you back at the very end?
I always think that it's better to be safe than sorry in these situations, because I don't know about you guys, but I think there's a very good chance we'll get some green-white checkers at the end of this one. We've seen the way they're racing. They've narrowly avoided some big wrecks just over the last 30, 40 laps or so. When we get down to go time in those last few laps of the race, I think there's every chance we'll see a little bit of a rash of yellows. And so it's worth giving away an extra couple of seconds, I think, on pit road, especially if you're near the front of this group. You know you can afford to have a slightly slower stop and still come out somewhere in the draft. If you're hanging on at the back of the lead pack, it's more important for you to try and have the shortest stop possible. Make sure you don't lose the draft. But those who are in the top third of this group, they won't want to give away the trap position, but they can afford to if it means that they won't have to come in again later.
And this is all, again, assuming that we're able to get to that critical point to make a decision for green flag pit service that would decide who is in prime position to win or to not win this iRacing Daytona 500. You can see Boyd Hogan leading this race, continues to do so. He has now led more than a quarter of this race. That is impressive by any mark in the iRacing Daytona 500. If you combine the laps led by he and Joseph, you're looking at nearly half of this entire race, and it will likely exceed that number by the time this race is done. So truly impressive stuff that those two drivers have been able to do up until this point.
Just a reminder, though, you don't have to lead any lap except the final lap of the race for it to matter here in the Daytona 500. And it's quite interesting, right? We're talking about laps led in a form of racing where, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago that we had a driver win the NASCAR Truck Series without actually winning a race over the course of the entire calendar year. It's all about right place, right time, and I can't wait to see who has figured it out the most. Because I guarantee you one thing you don't want to do, Andy, is be the leader out of turn number 4 coming to the checkered flag, because you will be a sitting duck. You won't be at the line coming across in first.
Well, this is the age-old dilemma of superspeedway racing because, yes, in theory, on paper, you're absolutely right. The advantage lies with the car behind. Problem for the one car there, which suddenly seemed to slow. Was that a bit of...
He blew his engine.
White's overheated. I think he has. He's had an engine blow and very lucky not to get collected by those behind. And the number one car is headed for pit road.
And that is a shocking self-inflicted error by Parker White, the top-seeded driver in this race, represents Kanan Esports in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, and was simply too aggressive. Bump drafted Boyd Hogan. We haven't seen anybody with temperature issues so far tonight, but as he goes into the corner, he can feel it coming right there. Just moves high and gets out of the way as that engine lets go, and that is it for the Micro Center Toyota Camry as Parker White coasts to pit road, and he'll go from the penthouse to the outhouse. His Daytona 500 is done.
Hey, but I think he is a pretty worthy winner of best save of the day for the antics that we saw from him earlier, and I think we should also give him credit for seeing the signs that it was beyond a repair and that it was about to blow and pulling out of line and making sure he did so in a safe, efficient manner. We continue green, less than 50 to go.
I struggle to understand why he was pushing so hard and for clearly quite a prolonged time there, because as I said earlier on, you can push for a lap or so pretty close without it overheating. So it's possible, I suppose, that he's perhaps running a bit more tape on the grille. That would, of course, give you a bit less leeway with that. But at this stage of the race, everyone's single file. You're saving fuel. We've just been having that conversation, trying to shorten that final pit stop. You don't really need to be pushing the 5 car out in front. You're not going to escape from the rest of the pack, and there is no challenge from that outside line. So a bit of a strange situation that he found himself in there, and certainly not something you'd expect from a driver of Parker's experience.
And again, seemingly unforced, because there was no challenge on the outside line at that point. What he may have been doing is later in this race was trying to push, get the temps in the red to see how long he would be able to push, given if it's 2 laps to go. You know, can I push for a lap and a half, a lap and a quarter, right? What that number is, and he seemingly just overdid it. Whatever the case was, a strange way to see such a high caliber and extremely talented driver bow out of this great simulated race. The top 3 got a little bit of a gap there, so clearly, again, that experimentation continues with the draft. We talked about how this race is basically a massive R&D session. You're using the first 2 hours to learn, who can I work with, who do I not work well with, where can you push here, can you push there, is it good to make a move here, is it bad to make a move there? That R&D is continuing and is, in fact, I think, ramping up as these drivers are just trying to finalize. They're formulating, not in their brain, not only the pit strategy, but the physical racecraft strategy. What am I going to do from behind the wheel to win this race? And they should, by this point, have a pretty good idea. Everybody in this lead pack has got a good chance to win this race now that we've gotten into the final quarter distance.
Yeah, they've left themselves with an opportunity, and it's always interesting to look at the plus and minuses. You can see that on that left side of the screen. Inside of your front 10, those still with a major chance of winning. Everyone has gained positions outside of our pole sitter, who's been steady and held on to basically a spot inside of the top 15 through the course of the day. And look how many double-digit gains there are as well. It shows just how important attrition and working your way through the field can be. And one other thing to remember as well is that these drivers have multiple cracks at the iRacing Daytona 500. This is just the first in this open setup version of the NASCAR iRacing Series, and so if this race doesn't go so well, maybe they can learn and get something tweaked on the setup to go again later this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of these races you do will run slightly differently and will end slightly differently as well. So, to your point earlier on, Arjuna, you can try and make a plan for the final few laps. Almost never is it possible to actually enact that plan, because your plan is your plan. Every other car in that lead group has their own plan. They're not necessarily going to listen to you. They're certainly not going to be discussing those plans with you. And you might think that being second or third, starting the last lap, is the right place to be, and then someone does something unexpected. Someone makes a move. Your line checks up. You can't move high when you want to, and that suddenly starts to change things. So I actually think maybe being at the front into those final couple of laps is not a terrible place to be. You often get this situation where those behind the race leader are so busy tripping over each other to get to the leader that they just end up slowing each other down and potentially wrecking each other. So right now, I think Boyd Hogan will be pretty happy with where he is. I know there's another pit stop to come, but he proved at the last set of pit stops he's capable of coming back out of pit road as the leader, and that will, I think, be his target this time as well.
And I'm just looking for, who's next? Who else is going to join this pack? And there is a small group, Justin Levine, Colton Harvey. They are 3 seconds off of the race leaders. They are struggling to catch back up. 5 laps ago, they were part of this lead lap. And right now, they find themselves at a bit of a deficit. So they're just trying to collect them. You can see them right there, top of the screen, just out of the frame there. It's a trio of race cars. They are trying to catch back up to the lead pack. We always talk about how the last car in line is always at risk, but these 3 really need to work great and really perfect right now with each other. They can't afford to fall any further back than that 3-second benchmark that they sit at now. They need to get back into the lead pack ASAP.
But I think we're all kind of expecting, right, that the drama's not over. There's still a yellow flag potentially to come. The question will be when and how many. We've had attrition's played its part, but we haven't had, I would say, a big one yet, Andy, and you're always due one when you go super speedway style racing.
We should have had about 3 or 4, but yeah, you're right. They've somehow managed to avoid it. I do wonder whether we're still due one towards the end, because I think there is a caution to be had, certainly. I think once they start jockeying for position, there's a good chance that we'll see a wreck, and that will bring a lot of other cars back into play. We've still got plenty of cars running on the lead lap, so I think there is a good chance we'll still get it. I hope we don't, in a way, because I've really enjoyed watching the drivers flirting with disaster, but just managing to keep it all in check. But 40 laps to go now. That intensity is going to ramp up by the lap, especially once we get this final round of pit stops out the way. There's a good chance that many of them will take 2 or no tyres as well, so their cars won't be handling too well. I think we're going to see the action certainly ramp up inside that final 20 laps.
And it's worth noting, just for housekeeping's sake, that we are within range of pitting now and making it to the end of the race. Again, we've already come to a consensus, likely not going to happen. These drivers are probably going to go as long as they can to take as little fuel as possible. But worth noting, we are within range now of 1 pit stop to the end of this contest. That group of 3 that was trailing, to be just hit on them, they're going to try to make a 3rd lane back there, so they have caught up. That is a big step in the right direction. You can see the number 10 machine leading that group again. River Hayes, the lapped car, has been racing around these leaders for quite some time, pushed by Justin Levine. That is a lead lap car in the 18. Same with the 30, Colton J. Harvey. They not only caught up, but they're making some headway on the outside, and they're going from being in an uncomfortable position to maybe being the instigators. They're going to creep up on the outside to 7th, to 6th. Can they go for 5th and maybe more? They are flying on the outside line.
Still 20 laps to go until we're expecting them down onto pit lane, so incentive to get to the front and then start to work on the track position that they'll build up, but you can see just how much they're pushing and how much it's causing them to slip and slide on that outside groove, and now starting to stall out. But into turn number 3, the 10 and the 18 still linked up and rolling into the corner.
Oh, just a bit of separation going into 3, but it doesn't matter. The 10 had the momentum and is level now with the 2nd place car of Dalton Collins. Now, what does Boyd Hogan do? We've seen him make some interesting blocks so far. Will he choose to do the same against a lap car? At the moment, doesn't feel the need to do so. Look how quickly that changes the dynamic of the race, though. All it took was that 2nd pack to close. They had the draft, they had the momentum to make that outside line work, and we are 2 by 2 through the lead pack once more.
So we are back to racing at Daytona. 36, the number of laps to go on the scoring pylon. There is 1 slow car that the field is going to have to catch up to. They've had pretty good success and incident-free moments getting around slow cars. Cranberg, though, is going to be about 25 miles an hour slower, so this could get a little bit dicey as they're going to catch up to the lapped car coming off of turn number 4. Those cars on the outside, we talked about seams earlier. They're going to have to get down below that paved seam in the corner, and fortunately the short chute's going to widen things out a little bit. They will get through without incident. And now the 10 car challenging to get back on the lead lap. But the big thing is he will pull Justin Levine with him. And Levine's going to go from being at risk of losing this lead pack to leading this iRacing Daytona 500 in only a 5-lap window.
Don't think Hogan's going to complain too much because he's been the one punching the hole in the air for the vast majority of this run in the race. And one thing, of course, that's changed with this next-gen car compared to the previous generation Cup car, of course, is the removal of tape as something that you can throw onto the car at the very front. Something that, of course, would have been a factor in a situation like Parker White's before. But as we see the field streak their way on in, they're not going to be trying to maximize performance now with that tape. It's all about maximizing the pit lane time.
Boyd Hogan in, one car on the grass there, but Hogan is in, so too the 18, the 8 was in, it's the 26 that's been out wide onto the grass coming into pit road there. That was Chris James, who was a lap down, and he will lose even more ground now, likely through an unsafe pit entry. Now, are we going to see 2 tyres or 4? This looks like 4 tyres for most of our leading contenders, so they clearly wanted more or less a full tank of fuel. Out they will go again, and Boyd Hogan losing some ground there, so we've been focusing on him quite a lot of late, but look, a bit of separation to that first group of cars. If we don't get another caution, Evan, that could be costly.
And it looks like this pit decision is going to influence the rest of the field. They are not going to go late. More cars in. Look out, the 15. Oh. Way too hot. Overshoots it, and spinning is Adam Blocker. He is off into the grass. The 21 car, Jared Torres, overshoots the pit stall. High pressure situation and a couple of drivers with some missteps.
Yeah, let's first cycle back to what happened on the previous lap as they came on in, and Chris James got a bit of a shove from behind. We've been talking on repeated occasions, Andy, about just how difficult pit entry can be here, but now we're about to see the merge as cars roll themselves back up to speed.
Yeah, this is significant then. We've got some heavy hitters in this group. Where are they going to filter out? Well, there goes a group of cars that have not yet pitted. Garrett Maines suddenly finds himself running back in the top 5. He's amongst that group of cars who haven't pitted. We haven't had a caution since Garrett was in the wall through the tri-oval all that time ago, so his car likely still damaged. This, though, the fight for what will become the race lead, and you can see it there, the momentum of those who have already stopped. They will cycle right back through, and I really shouldn't have worried about that 5-car. Boyd Hogan already right back there with them.
He's already been able to pick things up and to keep on going, so Rocky Boyd, the lead car on the pit cycle. He is the black Ford Mustang at the lead of this group that you're looking at now. They are running about 20 some odd seconds behind the Pacholi, Montgomery, Powell, Newman, and Maines group, along with Wilhite. Those top 6 drivers have yet to come down to the pit lane. Again, 28 seconds, notably, not going to be enough for those drivers to stay in the race lead when they eventually have to pit. You're going to spend at least 30-ish seconds on pit road. Depends on what you're going to do in the box. If you go for 2 tires, you're looking at 27 seconds in the box. If you go for 4, you're looking at, or I should say on pit road, 27 seconds on pit road. A 4-tire call is going to push your pit lane time to the 34-second range. So 28 seconds, guys, is not enough for Pacholi and company to make a pit cycle and get back out as the race leaders. Remember, these are all drivers that were running behind the lead pack before this pit cycle started, so that's worth noting, but they may decide to then stay out. They can go another 15 laps before they need to pit. They might stay out, try to catch a yellow, and get a bonus to track position, because it doesn't matter that people are pitting now to get fuel to the end. If they have an opportunity to pit, maybe get a little bit more fuel, track position, maybe just a dose of tires, I think we might get takers.
Yeah, I think now we do, but that's down below the double yellows. Tommy Gossett slides his way past Rocky Boyd, who lost a bunch of momentum down the back straightaway. You stole the words out of my mouth. If you're at the front, if you're either part of the leading trio or Newman, Maines, and Wilhite behind, you have to just cycle now as long as possible and hope and pray that you do end up getting a caution that filters you back into contention. Let's ride with Adam Blocker here. This was the wrong replay. We were hoping to get Adam Blocker's attempted pit entry, because we've seen some attempts, Andy, none that fared that badly.
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular, wasn't it? And again, heads-up driving from those around him to avoid clattering into him as he was spinning in front of them down pit road. There's a lot of distraction going on there. You're looking for, obviously, what the cars around you are doing, but also trying to look for your pit stall, and that was quite a long way down pit road that he ended up getting sideways. Here we go, so he's coming in late. full ambition around the outside, but then gets pinched off a bit by the 10 car, gets a wheel on the grass. Look, he was going to be caught speeding in the pit lane anyway, but he gave it his best shot to get slowed down and merge in. There just wasn't the space, and he was quite a bit too late on the brakes.
You could hear, as everybody else was slowing down, you could hear him giving a little bit more. It was a Hail Mary move that does not pay off, and again, I guess you give credit where somebody tried to make a move. I just don't know if it was necessary to take that risk. You're already in a pretty good spot. I get try to make up some spots on pit road, but it just seemed like another unforced error. We've seen a handful of those on pit road tonight that have shuffled out the running order in this race. Again, the pack that you're looking at is not the race leaders. These are the cars who have pitted and can go to the end of this race. Garrett Maines and company saying over the radio that they will be coming to pit road, I believe, the next time by. So those outstanding cars, at least the Newman, Maines, and Wilhite contingent, 4th, 5th, and 6th on track, they will be pitting this time through. That would leave only Pacholi, Montgomery, and Powell 1st, 2nd, and 3rd as the cars who have yet to come down pit road. But we'll see if this chatter is true. I just keep an eye on Maines & Co.
And of course, note the fact that we have seen those that have already pitted settled into a rhythm since their cycle of pit stops. They know that right now they don't want to trip over each other and cost each other time. It's all about just riding around and taking this race as far as they can feasibly take it, and then we'll see it play out from there. I have thrown my teammate Adam Blocker under the bus plenty, so I will also give the racing driver excuses that he gave to me before this broadcast started. Poor Adam has just flown in today from Sebring, where he was working as part of the IndyCar program. He works for Chevrolet, signed to Team Penske and to Joseph Newgarden, so he's got some excuses, Andy, but not so many.
Well, how many times is he allowed to use that excuse? Because he's been in a couple of little incidents over the course of the day, and actually had fought really well to get himself back into sort of contention there on the lead lap. Remember, was 2 laps down at one point, and I was going to make mention of him a while ago before it all kicked off, that he'd done a really good job to get back up there and get those laps back. But yeah, sadly we'll lose a good chunk of that time that he gained with that mistake. Here's the sort of second pack of cars then. So Newman, Maines, Wilhite, all running nose to tail with a couple of lap cars as well. How much longer do we think they can go on fuel though, Evan? They've got to be getting to within 10 laps or so now of the window.
You got 2 distinct groups. This battle for 4th position, Newman, Maines, and Wilhite, who I swear said over the radio they were coming very soon, have been out there for 35 laps respectively for all of them. So they've got a max of 5 or so left. So they will be pitting before lap number 181 just because they simply can't go any further than that. There is even more flexibility than the cars in the top 3 because those lead 3 cars, Pacholi, Montgomery, Powell, pitted only 30 laps ago. So they've got a 10-lap window for them to decide to come down to pit road. So I expect they're going to burn most, if not all of that.
Yeah, meanwhile, still waiting for that chatter to come true for Maines, Wilhite, and Newman to slither their way on down to pit lane. They got some help in the form of some lap traffic behind, just helping to boost their momentum a little bit more, but you can see just the speed that the bigger pack behind is starting to try and close with. Still holding that gap at about 2 seconds. I've not really seen it close down too much just yet, but with 25 laps to go, time is definitely winding down.
Certainly is, and those drivers who are in that second pack, they are starting to get to grips with what their situation is. They know that they're going to be the group fighting it out for the win here unless we get another caution, and so now the plotting really starts to happen. What do you want to do in those closing laps? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to work with? And crucially, when do you make that move? How early is too early? How late is too late? Well, they've got 25 laps to try and sort it out.
And some good laps led for this group, but again, they are in a desperate spot here, right? Off cycle, solely trying to gain the advantage of catching a timely caution flag to get themselves back in this race. It is a race against the clock for them. So if you're in that second, or really the third pack, right? Justin Levine on the back, the cars who have pitted and can go to the end of this race. You can't shoot yourself in the foot here. You cannot fight. You cannot invite all these other cars to get into the race. If you guys get too aggressive now and cause an accident, you are going to gave a golden ticket to 6 extra cars to join the battle for the race lead. The least amount of cars in the battle for the win, the better for your chances of winning. So I think those cars need to maintain patience until all of these outlying groups have pitted. Then you can go at it, because you'll probably be at 15 laps to go from that point. Maines and company have said this is the lap in which they will be coming down pit road. It is a trio of drivers who had yet to pit from that group, and they're going to bring a bonus car down with them. So Garrett Maines heads to pit road. Brad Newman's down with him. Chris Wilhite plus lapped car Justin Lowry in for their final service.
Nice and tidy from all 4 of them as well. Newman immediately having to hit his box, which was at one of the first ones at the very start of the pit lane. Into that phase now, though, where starting to tense up for the drivers, because like Evan mentions, you want potentially fewer cars around you at the end, but then you also have to be cognizant of the fact that you've got fewer cars to help you and maybe give you a shove to the line, which may very well be needed at a track where you basically can guarantee you're going to need to break out the camera to figure out who wins by what is going to be an infinitesimally small amount of pixels.
Yeah, absolutely. Who can you trust to help you? Who do you know is going to stick on your bumper and push you? And who do you suspect might pull out and make that move for yourself? I think everyone's got their suspicions now as to who the aggressors are going to be in the closing stages. But really, at this point, they can afford to wait. If you time the run right, you can gain 7, 8, 9 spots on that high line pretty quickly within the space of a lap or so. We've seen it a few times during this race, so there really is no big rush to make that move just now. The sooner you make it, the more chance there is that you're going to end up causing a wreck and bringing other people back into play. So right now, I think we might see this situation stay just about the same, perhaps for another 10 or 15 laps or so. It really is those final 5 laps where the moves will be made.
And we talk about positioning. Do you want to lead a race? Typically, but we talk about how much of a sitting duck you could be as the race leader coming off of the final corner. We saw it just last night when Casey Kerwin was looking to get his 2nd win of the year in the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. He had won the Clash 2 weeks ago. He had led for the most part late in that Daytona race, but it was the last lap and really last corner move by Tucker Minter to steal the win from him. That's all it takes, is a couple 100 feet to flip the script and win the race. And that's why all of these moves now are so much more important than they were previous, as your top 3 are in. Powell, Montgomery, Pacioli down, along with lapped cars DeMerchant and Langford, and that will put a button. Every single car is now made their final pit stop of the night as scheduled, and they can all get to the end of the race.
But with 20 to go, the possibility here of extra green-white checkers is going to send chills, I think, through the hearts of some of these contenders who are going to get to the end of the schedule race distance with 35 laps complete. If we get 3 attempts at a green-white checkered, they will be stressed out. It all comes down to the margins and to how it plays out. I am quite curious, though. You mentioned Casey's misfortune last night. I'm going to have to interview him while he's driving during the Porsche Esports Super Cup All-Stars this coming Saturday at Magny-Cours. How do I bring up his misfortune in a tactful manner?
I don't know if there's a way to. I think that he's going to be happy with the fact that he got a good result. Listen, he won the championship last year, a 3rd place in the season opener.
True.
I think Casey Kerwin's going to have enough of a good season that he's not going to be too peeved about it, but I promise you he'll think about it for a little while, and that's the thing about Daytona. He didn't lose the race because of anything that he did wrong, just the nature of the beast, and he'll win many of plate races along his career the same way that he lost that one.
That Casey Kerwin, too talented. Road cars, dirt ovals, rallycross. I'm sure he can probably do it all. It's not fair.
I know, don't you just hate people with that level of talent? They need to learn to share that around, don't you? We've seen some real talent on show in this race as well. Some fantastic drives from a number of the drivers, really, that we've seen at the front all race long. Some big moments that could have been an awful lot worse. Some really good car control on show, and it's not easy to do in these next-gen cars. They are a bit snappy. They tend to lose control very easily, and that, I think, is a sign that the drivers perhaps are starting to figure out not only how to drive these cars, but also how to put a bit of catchability into the setup, maybe make it so that the cars are not quite as lethal as they once were. And that is what's allowed us to run caution-free now for the vast majority of this race, since before half race distance. In fact, nearly the last 3/4 of the race going green. Will that last, though? I've got my doubts, but the longer they stay single file, the more chance there is of that happening.
And it's worth noting, what you see on your screen right now is 10 cars, only 7 of them are on the lead lap. And let's call out and make the differentials so you can know who's in the battle for the race win here late and who is not. The lead car in this pack is Justin Levine. He's trailed by both Boyd Hogan and Marcus Ruckman in second and third. Those are all lead lap cars. The 4th car in line is a lapped car in Alex Murray. 5th car in line, Tommy Gossett, P4. Rocky Boyd, 5th. He is 6th in line. The 7th car in line is P6, Nick Vroman. P7 on the racetrack is Joseph. He's 8th in line. And then 2 more tagged onto the back. Chris James and then Colton J. Harvey as well. Those are the lapped cars that are lingering on the backside. So just a little bit of lapped cars in the mix here. Don't forget to differentiate those when it comes down to the battle for the race win, is that the 36 car is not fighting for the race win, neither is the 26.
And common courtesy, I think, would mean that once we get to those final 2, maybe 3 laps of the race, you will see the cars not fighting for the race victory step aside and allow us to slingshot our way to the end of this one. But they're also trying to make sure they can guarantee the best position possible. And again, what is not just one of our iRacing special events, but the start of a 36-week adventure that follows the NASCAR schedule and takes drivers around the US in these next-gen machines.
Absolutely, but drivers very much focused on trying to get themselves a Daytona 500 win. This is the biggest race of the season, and they will absolutely want to start things off with a victory in at least one of the, I think it's a total of 8 Daytona 500s available to be competed in across the open and fixed setups. And this is the first opportunity with the open setup to try and get a victory. Looking at some of the players in this lead group and trying to figure out who perhaps the favourites are. The top 2 at the moment in the race, Levine and Hogan, we've spoken about a lot this race. The driver we're on board with now, though, Marcus Ruckman, we really haven't mentioned all that much. He is a bit of a new player up there near the front. The 7th, Nicholas Vroman as well. He's been there or thereabouts, but not necessarily making any of those big moves. Will it be the likes of Boyd Hogan, who's been making the aggressive moves all race long, who comes out victorious, or will it be one of those dark horses who have kept themselves out of trouble? They've perhaps been making friends rather than enemies. Might that be the thing that takes them to victory lane?
We're going to find out now with 14 laps to go. You can see 1 car hanging off the rear of this lead pack. That is Christopher Hill. Again, just another lapped car, not a factor in the battle for the race lead, as Justin Levine and Boyd Hogan get a little bit of a boot and scoot and boogie going down the backstretch, pulls a little bit of a gap. That's the 18 car testing the waters here. You'll actually start to see drivers want to hang back a little bit, right? You're not going to want to be right on the bumper of the car in front of you come the final lap if you're trying to overtake them, because there's no way to gain a speed advantage. You're actually going to want to linger back a little bit and then get that draft up to them, make your move once you get on the bumper. So don't be surprised if you start seeing some gaps on the bottom. Drivers going to start to play with pushing somebody out in front, separating them from the draft, brake dragging a little bit to gain some separation. Now is the time to take that arsenal of moves that you've been practicing for the last 188 laps, all that R&D that we referenced. Now you got to lock in. You got to make a decision. What is your Daytona 500 race-winning move going to be?
I think we're already seeing the games being played. Last time, lap time's not that quick if we're being honest. We dropped 0.6 of a second or so. They've come back up on this lap, but that we are starting to see the dark arts being played as the wild end to Daytona starts to pick up, with the sun now having set below the horizon as we race ourselves into the night.
That's a really difficult thing to do, because you're trying to practice what you want to do on the final lap, but you don't really want to let on to the other drivers around you what it is you're doing, because that gives away your potential race-winning moves. So yeah, you're dropping back, you're trying to time it, you're thinking, right, if I'm 2 car lengths back coming off turn 4, do I think I could get that run to beat them to the line? Of course, you can't pull out and try it, because no one will go with you and you'll probably fall to the back. So it's a bit of a guessing game, and right now the inclusion of that number 6 car in this lead group of Eric Royce, that's really complicating matters as well. For Boyd Hogan in second, he would really love it if that 6 car got out of the way, because it's helping Levine at the moment. means that even if Hogan were to pull out and try to pass the 18 would still have some drafting help. So lots of things at play here, not that long to try and figure it out, and you're trying to work it all out without giving away your move.
They're going to hold their cards close to their chest. Late in this race at Daytona, 36 drivers embarked on the mission to win this race 2 hours and 38 minutes ago. And right now, there's 7 of them with a real good look. Here goes Hogan. Gonna sidestep to the outside. Field draft with Tommy Gossett, and it is on with 10 laps to go. Hogan gonna drive alongside the 18 Machina Levine. Remember, the 18 right now is drafted with the 6 of Royce. That is a large car, and right now it's not paying well for the 18 to be stuck behind him. Hogan to the race lead up top, and now Royce pulls out of the way, but it is too little, too late. It has decimated the inside line, and now a crossover. Gossett gonna leave the 5 out to dry, and Gossett will go to the race lead.
And this is where Hogan hadn't made too many friends. Did Gossett see an opportunity to let the number 5 slip backwards in the pack? They're starting to pick up the intensity. Lap traffic gets out of the way and allows them to brawl up towards the front. Vermont, who started on pole and drops back to be conservative, has fought his way back to the point. So many storylines. Who comes out on top?
As we've seen all race though, as soon as Boyd loses ground, he immediately looks for a way to get it back. Jumped to the outside, and the 9 car of Marcus Ruckman went with him, and just like that, as they come off turn 2, the 5 car is back out in front with a real head of steam on that outside line. Now he's cleared the inside. Does he stay high or drop down low? There's your answer. Stays up high, sort of merging down low into the corner though, brings Ruckman with him, and now Levine will head up that outside lane.
He's back leading the outside. His drafting support comes from the 26 car behind. That is going to be Chris James, one of the lapped cars we talked about. The 36 also in line back there. That's going to be Alex Murray, a second lapped car, but he's not the story. Look out, what a bobble and what a save as Marcus Ruckman almost got turned off of the nose of Tommy Gossett. Recovers the race car, pulls back up, but it's going to force an uncomfortable 3-wide scenario that the 11 machine of Joseph is squeezed in the middle of.
If you didn't think the gloves were off, well, there's your proof. At this point, there is no holding back, and it is all about pushing your way forward, and a big old shove is allowing Levine and Hogan to break away from the pack behind. Gossett trying to sync themselves up, and they'll be allowed to be able to bring themselves back into contention, but so much momentum going back and forth. None of these drivers can feel confident in how this race is playing out.
And speaking of momentum, there's going to be some real momentum coming from 4th place on back. Those top 3 got way too far in front, and they've now really got to try and put the block out there. They succeed in doing so. One car will drop down though, and that was Joseph, wasn't it? No, he's coming through on the outside line, and so Roman, I think it is, dropping back through the middle. The leaders though, it is the 18 of Levine with the advantage. Boyd Hogan right behind him. 4 cars pushing each other to 3.
And it's a 4-car breakaway on the inside line. You jump on board with a replay from what happened to the perspective of Gossett as they came off the tri-oval. There was a little bit, again, of cheating, pushing too early there. And I said, treat that tri-oval like a corner. And it was the same reaction as what you would have done if you pushed somebody on the exit at 2 or 4. Just a little bit out of line, hooked him sideways. And it was a good piece of driving to stay in this race. They will both continue on. Gossett tempted to go to the bottom. That's because the 18 of Justin Levine left it open for him. So the push courtesy of the 7 of Nicholas Vroman. Gonna push the 20 car to the race lead, and now Tommy Gossett in control with 6 laps to go, but for how long?
They're all, I think, fighting to not be the leader out of turn 4 on the final lap. Currently, Gossett in the driver's seat. Levine having to try and gather that momentum back up as now they're battling side by side for 3rd on back, but so much momentum, and still it's now Levine that cuts down low, 3 wide for a moment.
Yeah, goes to the middle though, didn't go right to the bottom because he wants that push from the 5, eventually had no choice, had to block the 11 of Joseph, which he did successfully. Now Joseph to the outside as well, the position's changing by the corner, side by side down the backstretch, but the 11 for the time being has no help.
No help, and he's going to try to pinch down to side draft a little bit, but that is not going to be enough to hold out the 18 and the 9. And with that, Justin Levine goes back out in front to the race lead. You're looking off of the back of the leader. Watch that outside line develop, and some connection issues for the 9 car behind him means that he's not going to get the drafting help he needed through turns 3 and 4. And that'll open the door wide open for Joseph and the 20 of Gossett to cycle back out front, and almost shades of plate racing. 10 years ago, a couple of tandems lead us to 1 and 2.
Literally what I was thinking. Did we break out our teleporter? We're seeing these 2-car trains being able to build up such a rhythm, something we've been very unaccustomed to seeing, and it means that if we get that on the final lap, there's an opportunity to have 2 cars break away, to have a bit of a canter to the line. As it runs right now, once again, they'll stack back up with Hogan down low, syncing up with the 18 and building momentum once again. But 3 laps to go. Hogan in the lead and getting loose once again.
That was close to disaster yet again. That was Levine on his rear bumper, but Hogan saves it and manages to clear Joseph and pulls to the outside line. So now 5 and 11, perhaps the 2 fastest cars in this lead group. They've hooked together on the outside line. Can they fend off the pack for 3 laps?
The outside has the speed. Look out, the 18 car gets turned. Levine, what a save in turn number 2 again. An incredible piece of driving, but now is Levine too far back to catch back to the race leaders.
Once again, another candidate for Save of the Year. Parker White, we need the award back. Front of the field, though. It's Hogan now that's going to go around. Joseph slides his way forward. 2 laps to go at the line, and 1 by 1 there, falling. 3 cars left to fight.
And then there were 3, the 11, the 20 and the 7. I'm not convinced that Hogan has the time to get back to them. He's lost so much momentum. Lap car staying out of the way, and now it's a 3-way shootout. Now all of a sudden it might be possible to plan your move on the last lap with just 3 cars set to fight it out. It looks as though this is going to be a very close one between these 3, but likely just those 3.
And look what Tommy Gossett's doing. He is trying to push Joseph. He wants to turn it from a 3-car race to a 2-car race because Vroman is an X factor. The 7 is an unknown. If he can stay with it, he can make a move on Gossett before Gossett can make a move on the race leader. So the 20 really wants to shake the 7 car, I think, and make it a 2-horse race. 1 lap to go in the iRacing Daytona 500.
Joseph is in the proverbial driver's seat, but also in the hot seat, knowing that with the double toe behind, it's Gossett and Vromon that have the opportunities to pop out of line and build their momentum on the run to the line. They're closing behind, they're linking up, but it's not going to be enough. It's maybe just 2 cars left into turn number 3.
But when they get side by side, that could change. Joseph, 8th in this race a year ago. He is a mile from home. Can he hold on to the flag?
Tommy Gossett gonna look to make his move as they come off of turn 4. He'll look to the outside. Joseph's turned into the outside wall. Gossett gets clear. Here comes Vroman to the outside. And Nicholas Vroman steals it to win the iRacing Daytona 500.
Pole to victory lane, but it was not as simple as that. 500 miles later, stand up, Nicholas Vroman.
We spoke way too soon when we said it was a 2-horse race. There was always a chance that the 2 at the front, Gossett and Joseph, were going to tangle. That's exactly what happened. The move was always going to come from the 20. The block was equally predictable from the 11. And it was the 7 car that was in the right place at the right time to take advantage.
And for all the dominance out of the likes of Joseph, for Justin Levine, and for Boyd Hogan's 70 laps led, the driver who goes to victory lane leads only 2. The most important being lap number 200. Nicholas Vroman going to slow down and celebrate on the front straightaway as a 2023 iRacing Daytona 500 champion. Place at the right time. And maybe that's a good excuse. I was going to say good excuse to jump out, go get the flag. We'll keep it rolling again and he did everything he could to not be the story, to not be the one taking risks, set himself up to be in the right place at the right time to take advantage of others' misfortunes. Everybody knew something was going to happen off of the final corner between Tommy Gossett and company, and Vroman had just enough time to slither his way to the outside and take the checkered flag.
And as the donuts come to an end, the racing also comes to an end. An opportunity for these drivers who have survived to also pat themselves on the back, because Evan, just surviving one of these races is a victory in and of itself. However, it's top marks to our pole position winner.
It really is. Let's take a look at our iRacing full race results tonight. The final margin of victory for Nicholas Vroman is 1/10 of a second. Atop Tommy Gossett, Boyd Hogan will end up on the podium with Ruckman and Levine, your top 5. Boyd, Collins, Harvey, Montgomery, and Torres will round out your top 10.
11th goes the way of Sean Powell with 29 behind him, and then Hoffman, the final car in that little gaggle of cars. Joseph classified at 14th at the end of the day. He'll be slightly disappointed, along with a handful more cars that end up being scored on the lead lap, but only 18 of them able to classify themselves as having completed 500 miles. It's Eric Royce and Seth DeMerchant that line up 19th and 20th.
Yeah, Eric Royce, first car, 1 lap down, did his best to stay there, didn't he? Justin Lowry was also a lap down, a whole host of them that ended up a couple of laps back, and then those that had a few big problems. Adam Blocker had several problems, 16 laps down by the end. Tyler Justice was in the wall early on, he was also 16 laps back. Christopher Hill and Parker White, one of the big stories in the race there, Evan. Parker White should have been a contender for the win, winds up retiring 50 laps from the flag.
And to round this one out, all the drivers did not make it to the end of this race. Will include, Chris Pfeffer. You've got Adriano Pinheiro, Jesse Atchison, Kyle Perry, Alan Ballacino, and Joseph Piscata. They are going to be the DNFs to round out your field of 36 for this running of the iRacing Daytona 500. Had a lot of everything that we expected in this one, gentlemen, minus the big one. And that's not for lack of trying. There was a lot of real aggressive racing. We saw a lot of those moves in the last 10 laps in the first 100, admittedly, but a couple of accidents, a handful of green flag pit cycles, and a bit of pit strategy sprinkled in at the end are going to set us up for another thrilling end, just as we got to sunset here in Daytona Beach.
It's a great way for us to get ready for the real world event this weekend, the Great American Race, and it's a great way for these drivers to get themselves underway with a 36-week campaign following the NASCAR Cup Series as it makes its trip through 2023. But also, at least for me and Andy, an opportunity to finally say goodbye to the Daytona International Speedway. We first said hello to it here in 2023 on January the 14th for the iRacing Roar. A week later, we returned for the iRacing Daytona 24, and we close it out now with this 500. And now we'll say goodbye to the Sunshine State for now. We'll say hello back at the start of next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed my time at virtual Daytona, though. My time hasn't necessarily finished here. I'll be taking part in another couple of Daytona 500s. I'm ready to go for another one now. Make it 3 in 24 hours. Why not? But what a brilliant place to spend some time. It has put on a real show for us over the last few weeks as well. We had a fantastic 24-hour race here. That was certainly a brilliant Daytona 500. Caution-free for most of it, but it did not stop us having a real thriller of a finish. What more can you come to expect from the Great American Race?
And maybe you learned a couple of things to do and maybe what not to do over the course of this race as we take a look and keep things focused on the NIS side of things and look at the 2023 NASCAR iRacing Series schedule. Of course, the notables are those 4 bolded races, the full-length ones that you'll see on the 2023 special events calendar. Of course, the Coke 600 at the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. Everybody loves the night race at Bristol Round 29. And then as the NIS works through the playoffs, that Phoenix finale as well, part of the special events calendar.
Yeah, and that's just one small part of the bigger suite of events that iRacing still finds a way to put on. We're now 4 down and still plenty to go. A bit of a break before we go for our next iRacing special event, which of course will see us return to the Sunshine State, albeit at the very, very bumpy Sebring International Raceway. With Andy, we get to see more IMSA competition in yet again another one of our VCO Grand Slams.
Yeah, another really underrated, challenging race this, the bumpy concrete Sebring circuit with really very little room for error as well. Multi-class racing around there, the prototypes and GT cars sharing the track, and they'll have a lot less space to share than they did on the high banks of Daytona a few weeks ago. That's going to be a really exciting race, a real race of attrition, I'm sure, and perhaps another excuse for me to get back out behind the wheel too.
Tell you what, the Sunshine State really is the iRacing state, and we look forward to being in Sebring in a couple of weeks' time and next month. But until then, that is it for us here tonight from iRacing's virtual Daytona International Speedway. So on behalf of our entire team and for all of the drivers involved, I want to thank you for joining us. On behalf of myself, Evan Pasoko, for our Junior Kanky Potty, for Andy McEwen, and everybody else involved, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in, and congratulations go to Nicholas Vroman, an iRacing Daytona 500 champion. We'll see you next time when the iRacing special events calendar rolls on. It's South Central Florida's Sebring International Raceway. Until next time, good night from Daytona.